and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 149th take, live from the HF Barcelona studios of Euless, Texas. I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show, another 2-for-1 special, bringing some great people for you, some fantastic take ahead of you, and this is something you guys don't want to miss. So thanks for tuning in live. We're going to get started here in just a couple moments. Before we introduce the guests of honor, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible, and that, of course, is our sponsors. And tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate announced in early December the launch of the Liga Privada Unico Serie Bauhaus, an exclusive release for the European market. The basic tenet of the Bauhaus architectural movement is that every object must have a purpose in design. The new Liga Privada Bauhaus Short Robusto pays extra attention to leaf placement within the cigar, intentionally designed to take their European aficionados through a newly curated experience. The Bauhaus is a short Robusto format that is wrapped in a rich, earthy Connecticut broadleaf capa, includes a bold Brazilian binder, and is complemented using filler tobaccos from Honduras and Nicaragua. The Liga Privada Unico Serie Bauhaus is packaged in an elegant blue 12-count box with gold embossing. So you hunters out there, check out those European markets for the Drew Estate Liga Privada Bauhaus and get yours today. So really excited for also our show is also sponsored by Oveja Negra Brands, 4 unique companies who share a passion to provide innovative cigars for the next generation of cigar enthusiasts. Black Label Trading Company, Blackwork Studio, Dissonant, and Emilio are combining premium tobacco with an artisanal touch. Oveja Negra, where art and tobacco collide. Join the flock and visit OvejaNegraCigars.com to learn more. And welcome everyone. This is our 149th take, and I am so pleased to welcome our United Cigars guests of this evening, Smoke One Today and Start Living United, Misters Casey Johnson and Dan Welsh. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Great and outstanding. And you?
Oh, I am living the dream one day at a time, as always.
Awesome.
It was 80 degrees earlier this week. It is now about 8 degrees below freezing now. So a couple days later, and so I'm living the what is usual with all of Texas, which is just basically a roller coaster of climate.
Absolutely.
Climate maneuvering. So
yeah, what's the adage down there? If you don't like the weather today, wait till tomorrow.
Exactly. Well, heck, just wait till the afternoon. That's all you have to wait for. Exactly. But I guess it definitely beats having to shovel snow, every day for a couple of months, right, Casey?
Yeah, actually, we've been pretty mild. We got a little snowfall, and it's been we're halfway through December now, and not a lot on the ground.
I'm in Ohio, and it's been pretty temperate so far.
Yeah,
it's getting cold this week, but we haven't had any.
Now, does Ohio? So like, where I was having this discussion the other day on another take, we were talking about like the quintessential Christmas, like all the Hollywood movies, they showcase this white Christmas, and like I've watched Home Alone like so many thousands of times, and like there's like a perpetual layer of like fresh powder during the entire. Granted, it's a film, it's a movie,
yeah.
but like, I mean, Ohio's not too far from Illinois, where Chicago, where Home Alone's based. I mean, is it like that, Dan? I mean, are there months or week stretches where you just have like perpetual snow on the ground? Like,
so northern Ohio, like Cleveland, is got the lake effect from Lake Erie, and the whole stretch from there over to Erie, PA, and then Buffalo. So their weather's completely different. Columbus is dead center in the middle of Ohio, so all the northern stuff misses us. And then there's a lot more weather south of us, down in Kentucky that hits Cincinnati and doesn't hit Columbus. So we kind of luck out, in the middle of the state, not getting the top half or the bottom halves. Weather programs. I mean, we get it, but that's sometimes when that year when. Casey, when did Chicago have the huge freeze? It wasn't last year, right? 2 years ago? Maybe it was last year. Everything's such a blur. But anyways, that came down here, but it wasn't anything like it was up there.
Right.
That sub-zero, remember that sub-zero, like it lasted, a week or more.
Yeah, it was like the Tundra. Yeah, I think you're right. It was like 2 years ago, where it was just
Yeah.
miserably cold and
Yeah.
just continual storms and everything. So, Casey, are you with us? It sounded like you were going in and out there for a second.
Well, he's moving. He's not frozen.
No, he's not frozen.
I'm gonna lose you.
There you go. Oh, how did he predict that?
Man, that audio is good.
Frozen on the screen.
So Dan, while Casey comes back in here for a second, so I was just I'm just curious, like what did you decide to light up for tonight?
I'm smoking a Surrogates satin glove right now. Probably halfway through it already.
You know, I've got for a lineup tonight. I've got a animal cracker.
Nice.
For yours, and I started the evening off with the L'Atelier.
Yeah.
Special selection.
The new special selection.
Yeah, with this brilliant new labeling that you guys have put on this.
Yep.
And so I'm going to fully fall on the sword here. I mean, I asked the dumb question in the green room. I was like, guys, is this new? Is this new? And you guys obviously confirmed that and everything. But Dan, you pointed out a really unique characteristic about this new branding here. Just share that with my audience for you. And I'll see if I can get it on this.
I don't know if they can see it on there. Maybe if it gets in focus, but there's embossing through that middle section that actually says Tatuaje over and over and over. So if you look real close, you can see it. And then, as you pointed out, Bear, on the back, you've got the PHJC logo. Again, just driving home that all these products are part of the Tatuaje family. So
yeah, they're all under that umbrella. So
a couple years ago, we started putting little round stickers on all the Surrogates boxes, all the Atelier boxes, even La Mission saying official Tatuaje or Tatuaje. Let's say Tatuaje authorized product or official Tatuaje authorized product.
Yeah,
whatever. You get the idea.
We're going to talk about the unification of the brands here in just in a little bit here. But Casey, while we're talking about what we're smoking, what are you puffing on right now?
Well, I'm just finishing up a 50th our TAA 50th anniversary stick, and I'm going to move on to a La Mission in a little while.
Nice.
1959.
1959.
Yep.
Now I know we're going to get to this as well. That cigar scored pretty well this year in the illustrious Cigar Aficionado magazine.
Yeah, 95. There were two cigars during the year that got a 95, and then one of the Fuentes got a 95 in December. But I forget how their rules go. I've always thought December was like for the next year, but I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
I think honestly, I think their tastings were done in November, finished in November, and I think by the end of November they're into their second tasting.
Yeah,
to finalize. So we'll see.
So it really might be one of two cigars that got a 95. There were a bunch of 94s as well.
Yeah. It's performed well since its release by Cigar Aficionado standards. Like it's I feel like it's always gotten 90 plus, like across all Vitolas. So it's always gone in the wheelhouse.
We ended up 17 one year. What, 3 years ago was it, Dan?
With La Mission, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then Atelier regular has scored very well too, and Surrogates. I mean, right straight through, we've done very well.
There's a lot of 90 and 91 Surrogates, which is always fun to see. Cigar Aficionado put one of the novelty Surrogate names in there, right?
Yeah. My favorite was the Tramp Stamp. I thought it was hilarious that it made it in.
But as we kind of get smoking here and everything, and really enjoying some of these cigars. I know Casey's got a nice lineup too. I've got the Animal Cracker lined up next. Anxious to see what Dan moves on to.
Well, I've got a 1959 La Mission as well, but
okay.
Now that we're talking, I think I'm probably going to move on to the bigger Selection Special. I mean, we might as well just spill the beans since you had one out, and I'm going to have one out here next too. That last month, Casey, 2 months ago.
Well, 2 months ago.
2 months ago, we released or reintroduced Selection Special of Atelier in the original 3 core sizes of Atelier, the 52, 54, and 56. So what you're smoking was, that's new. It was never available in that size. We had multiple sizes that we had done with that darker Sancti Spiritus wrapper, because the only difference with that cigar is it's a higher priming Sancti Spiritus wrapper. There's no change on the inside from core Atelier. But I mean, when you were smoking it, like I would think that you think the same thing I do, which is doesn't even taste like. It could have been a totally another brand name, and you would have never known that was the only difference.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Dan, because that's always something that I was noting, was the fact that it is only a different priming, yet it does deliver a different flavor profile really well. Like the thing that I get out of the original Atelier versus the special selection, again, this is my first foray into this new Vitola, of course, but from my memory, is like the original Atelier had a lot more richness to it. There's a little bit more creaminess about it. And then the higher priming selection of it was, gave it a little bit more this rustic nature, a lot more woodiness, a lot more earthiness to it.
Absolutely.
So incredibly unique flavor, and still incredibly enjoyable too. It didn't take away from it as well, which.
And honestly, I think that's where, when we originally released the 46 in the SS, or in the higher priming wrapper, that's what people noticed the most. I mean, when that first hit the market in 10-count boxes, that was gangbusters. Did great. And I think people sat back a little bit and were like, wow, where'd this come from? So,
well, and Bear, that darker profile, a lot of people end up, talking about it, saying, oh, it's so much stronger. Well, it's, it's flavor strength, right?
Yeah.
But it's, because with the core Atelier, you go straight to, wow, what a finessed stick. It's so complex. And now you're smoking the same thing with a darker wrapper, and you don't go, that's not your first thought. Your first thought is, wow, it's got a lot of strength, but it's not strength. It's not physical strength. It's just flavor strength.
Right.
That's a soapbox I always talk about when we're doing events is, you like strong in flavor, or do you like, Ligero ridden strong nicotine sticks? Because we all use different terminology. Strength is,
I find
one or the other.
I find that the term full, like when I've spending this much time in humidors as I've had, it's like the term full is almost becoming as of full or medium or mild is becoming almost like as subjective as the flavor components of the cigar. Because I think there's so much like you were talking about there, Dan, so much misunderstanding when we talk about the terms of full bodied, full flavored, and because you can have a fully flavored mild bodied cigar, you just can't.
I mean, this is one. I mean, Atelier is medium. It's right down the middle, medium. But
absolutely,
and usually I guess we would go to, if you're saying it's full bodied, we're probably talking about the physical strength level, but not really all. I've had plenty of guys who are like, oh no, I can't take a lot of, the strong nicotine stuff, gets to me, but I like full bodied sticks, and they're meaning what you're meaning, which is meaty, you know, earthy, woodsy, those kind of flavor profiles that make you think of, you know, more body than finesse.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that brings about an interesting question, because, you know, for I would say a larger part of the Tatuaje profile, or the Tatuaje smoker, is more of that heavier side. There are
Right.
certainly many nuanced and milder offerings under that brand and everything, but, you know, as a, you know, L'Atelier, as example, like you said, is more medium, and more and lighter in strength and everything. And I would argue that Surrogates also has some mixed identity as well. I mean, where do you guys fall? Like, if you could describe your wheelhouse, what would it be?
Well,
we're definitely different. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, but I'm all over the place now, more than I've ever been. I think my palate's matured a lot, but it's also, you know, I could range anywhere from, you know, Cabaret One with Pete to Loki with Pete, which is the 2003 Kohonu, which is not a mild stick at all, a medium stick. That's a ball buster, and I absolutely, that flavor hits, and I'll nub that to, you know, to the end, and I love it. So I dance all over the place now, more than I ever did. Now, I used to be just a medium smoker. You know, I was, you know, Atelier, Racine in that realm. And with Tatuaje, you know, I delved into some brown label, which is medium plus, but that was as far as I went. I did not go super strong. You know, I bounce all over the place now. Go ahead, Dan.
I used to tell people all the time that I smoke backwards, because I smoke really strong sticks in the morning, and then you know, later at night, if I'm reading a book or something, I would get into a little more finesse stick, paying more attention to it, that kind of thing. That's still kind of, you know, true, but I'm definitely all over the place as well, and I definitely do a lot of probably a lot more strong sticks than finesse sticks, but it still all depends. That's the great thing
relative to moment.
Having, you know, this huge portfolio that Tatuaje has, is there literally is everything under the sun there. So
yeah, no, I mean, one of the ones that's really, the new Avitas for me is kind of my go-to lately. And that's you know, medium plus in that realm, but absolute medium full. Well, no, what is it? Medium plus, I'd say.
I'd say New Avitas is medium plus, and New Avitas Hebrew is medium full.
Medium full, right? So, you know, I'm in that, and that, just the wrapper leaf changes everything for me in that realm. So
I do a show a couple times a year with some of the guys from Cigar Federation, and I bring them on, and it's really cool. We do this beer exchange, and we drink beers from, like, basically because we're basically, like, we split the country. Trip's on the West Coast, Dennis is on the East Coast, and I'm here in Texas. And so we, like, get to experience each other's, like, you know, regional beer selection, which is kind of cool. And then we always pair it with a blind cigar. And a couple of we've done this 5 times already, and then a couple times ago, Trip gave us the Hibaro, and I was able to guess it blind, and that cigar was so good. And he did such a great job with pairing it with that beer that night. It was just outstanding. It was such a great experience. You know, but speaking of, Dan was talking about reading a book and everything. Things are certainly a lot quieter in 2020 than y'all's usual schedule. You guys, you know, traveling traveling around the country in a huge bus, also flying on occasion too, but like a lot of travel, a lot of time on the road and everything. And this is something that we were talking about before we started the show, was like, you guys, when we talk about the cigar in the retail world and in the cigar world, we talk about how the cigar event is, you know, overall is kind of, it needs some kind of rejuvenation. It's kind of a dying entity, you know, traditionally speaking. but not as far as Tatuaje is concerned, because you guys, I mean, it is a rock star event every time you guys roll into town, and it could be Pete by himself, it could be the three of y'all, it could be Dan by himself, it could be Casey by himself, it could be just the two of y'all. It doesn't really matter. I mean, people line out the door, and it is just unbelievable what you guys are able to bring to. I mean, so a couple questions to spin off this real quick. I mean, first of all, like where do you think that you guys are doing it differently, or how are you able to sustain the success over so long? That would be my first question. Dan, what do you think?
I think I would go to, I think it's the cigar that brings them in, right? And then, you know, not Pete will bring a crowd, obviously, right? You know, Pete's got rock star status, and you know, I'll pat us on the back and say people love us at events. You know, we have a good time with people, and they love hearing the stories about the cigars and all that. So that's a huge part of it. But I think the cigar brings them in first, right? So you got this huge portfolio. It doesn't matter what the focus of the event is. It still ends up, you know, being a Tatuaje event, big table full of, you know, everything under the sun. You know, if you like mild, we don't do mild, but you like, you know, the lighter side of cigars or stronger cigars, you know, we've got it. And there's just a huge fan base, from saints and sinners to just, you know, guys who have been smoking it since 2003. You know, there are guys that, you know, even older guys that when they discovered the brand, you know, in 03, you know, what was out there that was boutique. It was, you know, this was the defining moment for a lot of, you know, companies that are, you know, more like-minded in that realm of, you know, smaller companies. We don't like to overuse the word boutique and all that, but so an older guy discovers that, right? And it's like this hidden thing that no one else knows about, and he's still in that same realm, right? We'll get a little beef every once in a while about, well, you're not boutique anymore, and then we'll argue that if you take any one of the brandings under the Tatuaje umbrella, there's nothing that comes close to even some of the boutique brands that are out there, as far as the numbers produced and, you know, sold in a year's time. They're all very, very small brands.
Yeah, I agree.
Casey, before you answer the question, I will actually. I'm one of those people that will argue about companies being boutique or not. And I recently had the Rubin boys, you know, Bradley and Alec on, and Alec and I have this this back and forth about Alec Bradley being boutique or not. It's all in good fun, but as far as discussion was, but I would love to have that discussion with someone who doesn't think that Tatuaje is boutique, because yeah, if you wanted to judge it as an umbrella, I could maybe go with that argument, maybe a little bit, but it's not. You know, like there's three distinct brands, as we kind of are going to be talking about here shortly. Yes, it's all part of the same, but Tatuaje by itself, I don't think it's ever. I think people can. What the problem is, I think people confuse boutique with legacy, you know, and longevity. And I think that's where the biggest problem is.
Yeah, and now it's been around since 2003, and it's, you know, it's definitely grown. But what's grown is the portfolio.
Right.
Yeah. One thing to touch on what you were just saying is, you know, Miami, the products coming out of Miami, it's a closed production, right? You can't create anymore with 12 rollers in Miami, right? So it's not growing, but what's growing is the portfolio around it. And there are some brown labels that are made in Nicaragua, the Corona Gorda, the 7th, the 2012 Coho Nu in all three wrappers, and the 10th anniversary sticks, Belanc and Bone Chasseur. And, you know, and little petite cazadores are made in
petite cazadores and stuff like that too.
So that expands it, but even those coming out of Nicaragua aren't in huge numbers. But Miami's Miami's the best soapbox to stand on, Bear, when you're
Mhm.
arguing that point is, you know, how can you consider it not boutique anymore? I mean, it's exactly the same as it's been for, you know, once it grew to the where it basically is, which was probably about 10 years ago, you know, easily by 2010, the production that's coming out of Miami was the production that's coming out of Miami still today.
Right.
So Casey, I'm going to take two of Dan's points, and I'm going to be careful because I'm not criticizing Dan's point about the cigar. I think that is a point well taken, and I think that's proof is in the pudding there. The cigar definitely brings people in, but a lot of people make good cigars. So my question to you, Casey, and he mentioned another term, rock star. You know, Pete has that rock star quality, but I mean, I've been to an event with just the two of you guys, and there was, it was hopping. So I mean, how does that rock
Yeah.
star feel for you personally?
It really, you know, for me, it's not the rock star status. It's the approachability, I think, and the relationship with the retailer and the end consumers that I think really dictates the numbers that come to us. You know, our relationship with the retailers is always great. When we go to your stores in Euless and in Keller, we have relationships with end consumers and with your staff that make those events what they are. You know, we go across town to Kent or whoever, same thing. But I always go back to approachability and honesty and being open to conversation with everybody. I see it feels like when we go to your stores, it feels like home, you know, and we get that a lot all over the country. And a lot of it was paved by my brother, but I think we've expanded on it a little bit more. So.
I think it's really interesting how this expansive community, like you said, that Pete paved for and everything, has really kind of not just accepted but enveloped with you all, and it's kind of gotten to this echelon, if you will, where you guys, again, from where I sit, you guys do have this rock star appeal where you guys just bring people in, and I think the Saints and Sinners community definitely does have a lot to do with it. It's a very I think it's one of the most, if not the most underrated community in the cigar industry, because it's been around forever. Everybody has heard about it. Everybody knows about it. But I don't think people really appreciate the force and the support that organization brings. What have you guys noticed about Saints and Sinners the most over time, as it's developed from where you guys sit?
Well, the numbers.
Yeah, the numbers are just.
What's it up to now? What's the membership up to now?
I knew you were going to ask.
Ish. I'm not going to hold you to a number. I just ish.
I mean, it capped out at 1,600 at one point. I don't know if it's still there. I mean, you know, economic climate dictates that a little bit. It is, you know, what it is to get into the club. But you know, it's around that realm. And that's a big number when it comes down to it. You know.
Yeah, with exclusive group, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, you said exclusive. You know, it's a closed group, and someone gets to nominate, you know, a friend in, and it's grown because, you know, people know people that want in, and that's how they get in, I guess. You know, I guess you could just put a 5-pack together, sell it in a store with a, you know, membership card that you fill out and send in, and you could take the membership up to, you know, 10,000 overnight. But that's not the nature of the beast.
No.
I've always wanted to ask Pete this, so I guess I can pose it to y'all. Is it's very much modeled on the Masonic principle, you know, from Freemasonry, is like you have to know one to kind of get in, kind of deal. A little bit invited.
I don't know where they came up with that. Do you, Casey?
No, I don't. I think that might have been a Casper realm. Pete and Casper might have.
Yeah, I think it was. My opinion is, I think it was just to control the membership numbers, so that it didn't grow into a huge beast
Mm-hmm.
numbers
Mm-hmm.
wise.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't, history wise, like how they had that conversation, I don't know.
If it was more open, I can't even imagine what that number would grow to. I'm sure it would just be outlandish if it was just like open season on it.
I mean, you got to remember, that control piece has to do a little bit with, we're a very small company internally too. If you look at it, it's Casper, Pete, Kyle, and Ali kind of running the Saints and Sinners Club as a whole. And we've had our hiccups along the way, but everything seems to be smooth now. We've grown into it. So, yeah.
Well, a lot has evolved over time. That's going to take us into tonight's major point. And as always, our major point is brought to you by Wood Butcher, Maine, introducing durable and attractive wooden creations to your kitchen, backyard grill, and home using native Maine wood and other exotic wood species. Wood Butcher Maine products include butcher blocks, cutting boards, coasters, grill grate cleaners, and the ELOSOFUMAR favorite, the red oak cigar ashtray and cocktail coaster, plus many more. The Wood Butcher Maine's team passion for food, the pine tree state, and craftsmanship of the highest quality show in absolutely every piece. Visit woodbutchermaine.com. Yes, that's woodbutchermaine.com to explore the current collection. So gentlemen, this was the major point that I wanted to explore tonight, which was the evolution of the brands that you represent into the collective umbrella, which you now are a part of representing. So, Dan, we've had Casey on the show, and we'll certainly give L'Atelier its proper due in the spotlight. But I wanted to take the time to recognize that, while 2020 has been a cluster and everyone is on pins and needles waiting for 2021 to hit, like it's going to be a magic elixir of some kind, but it'll just not be 2020 anymore. I think most people will be celebrating that, but there is a reason to celebrate 2021 as well, because Surrogates will be 10 years old.
Yep.
In 2011. So Dan, I just got to ask, like, how did, let's go back to the beginning as this got started at New Havana Cigars. If you could kind of walk us through the brief history of it, like how does Surrogates come to be?
Happy accident. like most of our creations, happy accident. So as you mentioned, I had started New Havana Cigars in late 2008, as it was going to be a hobby. I was a database analyst, and I had a pretty good cigar habit at the time, and I was like, maybe that would help support it.
No, you're right the first time, Dan. Hobby, not habit.
Yeah,
hobby.
Yeah, right.
Cigar hobby.
So
a healthy hobby.
one of the things that I saw in the industry at the time was that, like Pete's Cigars, for instance, the stuff that existed online at that time, because online shopping was way newer than now. You'd go to Famous or any of the big guys, or maybe a small shop had something behind the scenes, but not like today where most shops have something behind the scenes online. And you didn't see any pictures. You saw a description that somebody put up and then everybody cut and pasted from, and it was usually wrong. So, people had Pete's Havana 6 red label up with the same description that they had for brown label, on and on and on. They had the wrapper wrong. Sometimes the sizes were wrong. They're just, it was copy and paste world. And it was like mail order catalog style, right? If you knew what you wanted, if you knew you wanted a box of Noeas, you could go out there and buy it, but it wasn't a shopping experience. And I had been buying cigars from the island online from Geneva, Switzerland, and they had an amazing site, that was like the history of, the island as far as cigars are concerned. We still reference that site if we're, wondering what a, Cohiba such and such size is. We'll look on that site to make sure. And so I went out to LA and I talked to Pete, and I'm like, I want to put up a site, but I want it to look like this. And I brought my laptop with me, and he knew the other site that I'm talking about. And I'm like, I'm not going, that far, but I'm talking about the shopping experience of seeing a good picture of the cigar, how it's packaged, that kind of stuff, and then a real description. And, Pete and I go back to 2000, 99, 2000. So when he started his brand, and I was back in Ohio at that time and following it and whatnot. So, I had an inside glimpse of everything that he had come out with up to that point. And so it was frustrating for me as a friend of his to see this stuff being, kind of misrepresented. So part of it for me was almost marketing for him, right? And then the other part was, start this side business. And so it just happened, and it was word of mouth, and people found the site, and then they started spreading it, and it got, it's still tiny. It still exists, and it's still tiny in the grand scheme of things. But it took off well enough that I had Tatuaje, Illusione at the time. I brought in Viaje when it first started because Pete took me to the trade show, and I got to pal around and meet some other people. So I was bringing in these small, actually boutique brands at the time, right? Yeah. And representing them online by carrying everything that they had at the time. That was the hook. Like, don't just pick and choose. You carry everything. You show everything, right? So you have a line sampler. If there's 6 sizes in a line, like when Illusione came out, it was 7 sizes. And so I had a line sampler that had one cigar of all the different sizes. So you could try them all, because it was new to you. You didn't know which one was going to be your favorite. So that's always been a hook of New Havana to do that kind of thing. Well, quickly, all 3 of those brands started doing what Pete does, which is a lot of limited edition stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So what you do when you have a few hundred, people on your email list, and you get something new in, you send an email out and everybody wants it, but you got 3 or 4 boxes, right? So you put them in 5 packs and you can service, 20 people, right? And so it was kind of, this limited edition stuff was really frustrating. And so I called Pete on a whim and just said, man, I'm so sick of this limited edition stuff. Just like, stop sending it to me, right? And I said, have you ever thought what a limited edition cigar would be if you just kept making it? And he said, what do you mean? And I'm like, all right, well, normal limited edition, let's say it's a $12 price point. You made 500 boxes of it, and it's, one and done. You sell out of it, the retailers sell out of it, and no one smokes it because they want to save it. That was part of this experiment as well. I called it a social experiment. I said, if you could create a cigar like that, but then just keep making it, one, price goes down, right? Because you don't have to make special boxes. It's in production. You're not, selling a ton of it, but it's in regular production. Yeah. And I'm like, so like that $8 to $10 price range, right? Yeah. And I said, go another step further. What if every cigar in that line was its own entity? It was like its own limited edition. Because what do you do when you create a limited edition? You decide what style of cigar you want it to be, which usually, then that plays into the wrapper, or you choose a wrapper that you want to play with, that denotes the style, right? And so on and so forth, and it becomes a project. Well, that's what Surrogates is. And so I pitched this project-based brand, and Pete kind of lit up like, yeah, that's kind of a cool concept, right? Because it doesn't exist, where every cigar would be its own thing. It was created in a size specifically for that blend and that style, and then you do something totally different and just keep adding it. And so we decided to do this Bone Crusher and Skull Breaker for New Havana Cigars as a run, thinking, we'll do a big run, and I'm so small it'll take me years to go through them, but we'll keep making them, right? So that was the concept. But we also, kind of wanted to expand on it and then just break it into a national realm. And so that's what happened. A year later, Pete was talking with all three of us about, starting what he was kind of calling a workshop, which is what atelier means
in French,
is
right?
a workshop, and getting us all involved, because our joke at the time, way back then, was Pete was a solo act in the music industry, right? And he wanted to put a band together because he really liked playing in a band, and that was kind of the birth of Atelier. And when we all went down on a trip to Nicaragua to the factory, and we were talking about it, and then I was on the bus and I said, so we could put Surrogates under this Atelier umbrella. And he went, yep. And so that's how kind of how it started. And and then I went down with him when we started Atelier, and we blended 2 more Surrogates so that we could come out of the chute with 4, with the intention of doing one every year and continually expanding it. So that that concept of project based, it took years for people to grasp it and for retailers to grasp what that meant, because out of the chute it was Bone Crusher, Skull Breaker, we did Tramp Stamp, and then Crystal Baller. All right, so Crystal Baller, out of all those, is the one that it's a finesse stick. It's a box pressed 56 ring gauge chunky mouthful, but it's medium plus, it's almost medium full, honestly, but it's it's medium plus, and it's a very finesse stick. And what I was hearing from retailers as we were traveling early on like that was, yeah, that one Surrogate with the blend, the Surrogates blend with the lighter wrapper, my customers, they don't go back to that one. And I'm like, but you explained that it's a completely different thing, right? And they're like, what do you mean? So they thought Surrogates was a blend, right? And then all the different names were just because sizes. It had a size, and because it had a different wrapper on it. And I had, we had to just keep pounding, like, no, it's a project-based brand. Well, what the hell's that? Well, think of limited editions, and you just keep making them. That was literally the idea, and that's the way it's gone still. Really, the only thing that's changed over the years is there were a couple. You're smoking that big animal cracker that was designed as a 6x60 stick. We blended that at the factory as a 6x60, and as they brought samples out, I smoked so many 6x60s that I about had a nicotine attack because I wouldn't put them down, and Pete would be like, "Put it down, man. We said we're going to have them, change this and this and this, and they're bringing samples out." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. I don't really like this one, but I want to see it through to the end and see why I don't like it." Right? Learning experience. Plus, I can't put a stick down. So, but we created that as a 6x60, and really early on, people were just like, I wish you would create a smaller version of it." And then, as a joke, when we were doing the 5-packs, we did Cracker Crumbs, which is literally that blend in a little 4.5 by 38. And then we eventually broke down and did the AC 550 Robusto, because that's what people really wanted. But the intention was not to do that. It was we blended that to be this big 6x60 ball buster.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned the animal cracker in that regard, Dan. We're going to come back to some stuff in there, but I want to get Casey's take on a couple of things. But before that, since you mentioned the animal cracker, I was one of those guys. Because I'm not a 6x60 guy. I'm just not. But I told you this. If it's not my favorite, it's 1A, 1B kind of, right? Yeah. It's at the top of my favorite 6x60. I smoke them all the time. I really love it. And I was like, and I was that guy. I was like, God, if you could only make a Robusto, right? Then Cracker Crumbs comes out. I love the Cracker Crumbs probably as much as the original. And then when the 550 got announced, I was so excited. And I think it was one of these cases where I overhype a cigar, and I I like it. I like it just fine. I think it's really good. It just doesn't compare to the
Yeah.
6x60. It just
to that
doesn't.
6x60, right?
Well,
So
people always ask, like when you're at the factory, they just roll Robustos for you, right? And to some extent, there's a little truth there, and there's definitely a lot of people that's their wheelhouse, so that's what they blend. They blend a Robusto, then there might not even be a Robusto in the line. They might have 3 other sizes that Robusto isn't even one of them. But obviously, before you market that, you're testing it at all sizes, right? And you might even have to tweak it at different sizes. But we don't necessarily do that. And with Surrogates, we totally don't do that. Like I mentioned, they roll what the project is going to be. We treat it like we're building a new limited edition stick, and that's the only it's only that size. So why would you blend it as a Robusto and then say, cool, that's really great, now make it as a 7x47 box press like the satin glove? Why would you do that? Right.
I think that's why the Animal Cracker is so good, because it actually is blended to that size. Where I think where a lot of 6x60s that I've smoked and don't enjoy, frankly, is because
they're an afterthought.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So,
Right.
Casey, to get your 2 cents worth. So like when Surrogates was launched and everything, where were you in the fabric? And I mean, did Pete and Dan come to you and talk to you about this? Like, what were your thoughts?
It's kind of weird because let's see, the year before we started the brand, I was working at an ice arena, and I was really looking to do some transition. Pete had brought me to the show. I've been to Nicaragua. I met Dan, let's see, the year before, I think it was.
Because I think you were there on the trip when they were packaging Bone Crusher and Skullbreaker.
I think so too. Yes, I agree. So, I was looking at what my brother was doing and seeing some things that I thought. I traveled a lot of shops early on in New England looking at how it was presented. I came from Adidas in sales before I moved home, and it was all about presentation. And I offered to my brother, after leaving the show the year I met Dan, I think, saying, listen, I can go fully entrenched and do some, not marketing, I wouldn't say, more of a, working with the reps and how to go about selling this. And he's like, nah, I got other plans later on. And it was the trip to Nicaragua the next time where everything kind of escalated. I was the last one in the show to figure out that we were all starting this company too. All of a sudden, boom, Pete was like, the trade show in Orlando, we're going to be launching the product, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, cool. But there was a press release before saying Atelier was starting. And I had no idea that press release was coming out. I'm like, I got to tell my boss what's going on. So, but it's been fun to watch all sides of this mature. I mean, from Pete being a solo artist to coming into the realm of the group with Casper, Dan, and I, and seeing how this whole thing would mature. It's been cool.
I see that you still represent Adidas well as a now Dan. It looks like he's adopted it as well too. So
I think they all have been doing it for years, so I don't take any ownership.
That's just an accident, but yes.
That's just coincidence. That's hilarious.
Well, I'm 6'4", so I always liked that, like, their XLs fit like a double XL for the most part, or even like a tall, because like this jacket's probably 15 years old.
Yeah, easily.
It's back before they got into all the, like even the sweats now, they're all, cropped down at the ankle, and, they're not quite like that anymore. They used to have that longer sloppy feel to them.
Right. Well, Adidas is kind of cool because, it fits a trend of whether it was the inner city vibe to the performance piece very well. We've always adapted, or the company had always adapted to that pretty well. It's funny because, you know, you talk, I listened to Pete talk about the monster and the exclusivity. When I was working for Adidas, you know, I was soccer specific. That's what I did. But I got to see a place called Harry the Greek, a shop in Boston, which was known for quick releases and limited releases, and Adidas was a big player there. I actually stopped by the store and had my samples stolen one day out of the back of my car.
Oh, wow.
Funny how, yeah, I was chasing guys down for a pretty cool Adidas stuff with guys running around with only left shoes on because they stole all my left samples.
It's interesting how that happens in multiple industries. Samples getting stolen.
yeah. Funny, yeah.
So Dan, to go back to the beginning.
Casey, imagine if they created that color wave, right? That special limited edition color wave, but they just kept making it, just the one color wave in a specific shoe. It wouldn't be special anymore. That's the concept of surrogates, and the experiment is, right? Like when you're smoking that stick, I mean, you're literally smoking the exact quality and what would go into creating a limited edition run. That's what you're smoking, but it seems very commonplace to people, right? And the numbers on surrogates is tiny, right? But they're always available. So like trying to get someone to understand how special that thing is that they're actually smoking would be the equivalent of that shoe. So now it's on the shelf, it's everywhere, it's even in department stores, only in that one color, the one that you were going to chase down. And all of a sudden, it's just not that special anymore. I mean, that's the mentality that I was going after. And it is an intellectual joke on my side because I'm like, I knew that's, you know, that's where a project like Surrogates would land. But it is interesting that over time, when people really start to understand it, they start embracing it as, well, that's that little hidden secret, right?
Well, you know, we talk about how it takes a while sometimes, and we've talked to other manufacturers about it takes a while to find what your signature cigar is. I honestly think that Dan, if you look at the performance of Skullbreaker and Bone Crusher, your originals are kind of your staples.
Yeah, they are.
They really are. I mean, you know,
they sell more. They're the big. Cracker Crumbs are the biggest seller in the portfolio.
Agreed.
By far. I mean, that's half of the surrogate sales, I think, is Cracker Crumbs.
Right.
We can't even make enough of those. They're always on back order.
Right. And you know, but the other two have been, you know, stalwarts. You know, if you look at inventory sheets that come out weekly, they're always yellow.
Yeah.
If not red.
And then AC 550 is probably right behind that.
Yep.
But anyways, go ahead, Bear. You were going somewhere with that.
Well, I was wanting to go back to a comment from the chat, or Orlando. You know, Orlando had mentioned this was something that occurred to me, and then he said it out loud, so I'll give him credit for it. Was, you know, you formed New Havana Cigars in 2008. I mean, what a trying year to start a new venture that was. I mean, talk about 2020 being the cluster that is. I mean, 2008. I mean, holy cow. I mean, what possessed you to think that this hobby could actually?
Well, because it was just meant to be a second thing, right? Something I could do in the evenings after work, right? And that's literally how it started. I found an office that was close to where I was working as a database analyst, so I could literally go over there at lunchtime and I could go over there after work. So I would get off at 4, go over, pick an order or two that came in and go drop them off. Ship them. And then do, you know, photo work and all that kind of stuff in the evenings and whatnot. But it was short-lived before it took off enough that it was like, well, that's going to be a day job now. So
I tend to tell everybody, when everybody's zigging, Dan was zagging. He made this thing a beast. So It's pretty cool how, like you said, 2008 was a real tough year to start something, and pretty
Yeah, but
amazing to see
that
where it's
wasn't
gone.
that part of it wasn't on my radar because I didn't have to take life savings and invest in something. I just I rented an office. My first order from Pete was maybe 10 boxes of cigars, and I put up a Hunter line sampler of brown labels, and I sold through them, and then I ordered 20 boxes of cigars, right, and then so on and so forth, and
Just kept
next thing I
building.
know, this humidor is full. and then transport time to now, and just our portfolio fills up the humidor. And I
Right.
still don't, I don't hold a lot of stock. I'll just, I'll have a box back and a box open for 5-pack samplers, and then there's a box back, and then then I order more. So it's not this big enterprise where I've got like, yeah, send me 10 of all those, and then they're sitting on the shelf until whatever. So
You mentioned that you carried some other brands early on, and one of the
Mhm.
ones that you mentioned was Illusione. So there's a part of that story of the beginnings of New Havana Cigars when you were talking about it to Pete. He had a visitor that day that he wanted you to pitch it to.
yeah, I was out there the weekend that Dion was coming into town to visit Pete, specifically to smoke his samples of the original document, the original Illusione. And so I was out there a day earlier than he was, and then we ended up spending the whole weekend, the three of us. And so by the time Dion got there, Pete was like, "You got to pitch this to Dion," and Dion was like, "Okay, that's really cool, but I really when this comes out, I don't want any of this stuff online. I'll never have it online." But I pitched it as, look, there are people that don't have access to a cigar store. What do you do with them? And I really just wanted to be like a small brick and mortar online, right? Nothing like that existed. And when I showed him and I said, the line, he loved the idea of the line sampler, right? I said, you're gonna have 7 sizes. Imagine, a 7-size line sampler. So I've got one of every one of your boxes open. So I've got 25 samplers to sell like that. And the other hook was, the way I got cigars from Geneva, Switzerland, they were vacuum sealed with a humidipack inside.
Mhm.
And so I had done that. I went to my local tinderbox and bought brown labels, and I sealed them. And Pete was like, what is that? And I'm like, that's the way I want to ship, because it's perfect shipping insurance. The cigar is going to arrive just like it would when it left the humidor. He had that pack. I think he still has that pack. I don't think he's ever opened that pack. But he used to tell the story about 5 years in. He's like, "Yep, I still got that thing sitting in my office, and the humidipack is still soft. I can feel it."
I have a Black Label Melmean jar still that you sent me. That humidipack is still spongy as ever.
It's still sealed like that.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Absolutely.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So Dion liked that, and when we got to talking, he's like, "When that first comes out, I'm probably not going to be able to get you boxes, but I can get you cigars." And he ended up setting up a thing with NHC that we dubbed ELOs, which actually him and Pete did basically about the same time, which we kind of dubbed everybody's leftovers, which you might consider them factory overruns or something, without bands. So Dion got me original CG4s and F9s that were unbanded. I won't say he rejected them, but it was, from when he was playing, right?
Got it.
And they didn't become the final thing. And he had bundles of them, and he was selling them at his shop in Reno. Then he's like, "Yeah, I can get you some of those, and you can put those up too." So that's another NHC legend is, every once in a while there's old stuff sitting around the factory, and we bring them in and do a ELO pack, and then everybody tries to figure out what the heck they are.
Yeah.
You mentioned the cigars that you were purchasing before this, the vacuum seal. You've been avoiding it. I don't want to step on your toes, Dan, if you're avoiding it for a reason, but
Nah.
but it was interesting. I heard an interview of you recently where you were talking about, in the early 2000s when you were smoking
Yep.
Cuban cigars. You were a big fan of the stuff that was coming off the island, and obviously you made your way through all the brands, and you had your favorites, just like many people. But the interesting comment that you made, that I think you're the only person that I know that at least publicly and is a huge fan of those type of cigars, that actually admits that the quality and the consistency has severely dropped off, even from 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, Pete will tell you the same story that you heard me tell someone else, which is, first of all, I had never had one until, I was a member of the Grand Havana Room in Beverly Hills with Pete. He got me into the club, and that was someone there gave me a stick once, and that was the first Cuban that I had, and then I found this site. If you've heard this story, stop me. But I found this site. So I'm traveling at the time. I'm traveling between Columbus, Ohio, and LA, back and forth every weekend. I had an apartment in LA, and I had house here, and I was going out there, and I was taking acting classes, and then I stumbled onto the Grand Havana Room location. I wanted to see where it was, and Pete was running the cigar shop down on the ground floor, which I didn't know existed. And I stopped in, and we hit it off, and I smoked a cigar, and then I started doing that every week. And then, I don't know, months later, he got me in the club, and then I started hanging out up there. And that's the first time someone had given me something. And so I go back home, and I'm trying to research how the heck do you even get that, right? And I stumbled upon Top Cubans, and they're out of Geneva, Switzerland. And a buddy of mine here, and I started ordering from them, and I would order like 4 boxes, and they would come in, and I would take them to LA. And the first time I took them to LA, I put them in my locker. Pete met me up at the club that evening, and I laid 4 sticks out in front of him and 4 sticks in front of me. None of these are banded, by the way. And he starts looking at them, and he's like, "Where'd you get these?" And I'm like, "I don't know," because I didn't know if they were real, right? I'm just, ordering something online from Geneva, Switzerland. I didn't know what to trust or what not to trust. And he stared at these sticks. He looked at them. He's smelling them, and he named every one of them.
Yeah.
Blind like that. He named every one of them.
Didn't smoke it, just on the look.
Just on the look.
Oh, that's incredible.
And then we started smoking through them, and he was dumbfounded. He's like, "Dude, these are way better than what anybody gets out here." And so then my friend here in town and I, we kind of got in this weekly or bi-weekly habit of ordering, and we'd split an order, right? And then that's all we were smoking. And kind of our goal was, like, we've never had any of these. Let's make our way through all the brands and all the sizes that we can. And so we had our favorites. Like, we always ordered Partagas shorts, and we very often ordered Partagas Series Ds. And when Cohibas were on sale, they weren't anything like what they are now. They were actually reasonable. So we'd get Cohiba Robustos because those are the only ones that would smoke. And so there was always a little bit of that, right? Like, if you got Esplendidos, you might get 4 or 5 sticks out of the box that you had the experience that you wanted. But back then, that was 01 to 03. And I didn't smoke any domestic stuff during that 2-year time frame, because it's kind of like when I wanted to get into single malt scotches.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's kind of like the bourbon or the beer piece, right? Yeah.
You take a nosedive and go down the rabbit hole, and it was a learning experience. But man, shortly after that, once Pete started his brand, and then I'm like, man, I don't even know what what's in the domestic realm anymore. Let's jump back into it. So my friend and I did that. And then we were following Pete's stuff. I stopped traveling by the '03, and he started his brand, and I was following it. And, I had a local tinderbox here that was one of his first clients, so they always had him. And so we jumped back in the domestic realm, and every once in a while we would order after that, and it just declined and declined. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with that. It's just, they were ammonia ridden, and, people were like, well, you got to sit on them for 5 years. And I'm like, we never sat on them. We used to just buy them and smoke them. They were good. They're just using young tobacco now, and it's not going to get better. Once the stick is rolled, you can sit on it for 5 years and it's definitely going to change. But the fact that the ammonia had never blown off of the tobacco in the processing of it, that ain't changing.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it might have dissipated some, but it's still not good tobacco.
Right.
And so, with some exceptions, there aren't many that I've really cared for easily 10 years or more now.
Right.
So Casey, I want to bring you in to say, I don't know if you remember that you and I actually had this discussion at Michael's a couple years ago about the Cuban acceptance, right? Where like people will buy a box knowing that 4 of 10 or 10 of 20 are smokable. Right. And I'm interested to get we had Casey and I had this discussion, Dan, but I'm eager to get your thoughts on this. Can you imagine, because people are so forgiving of that fallacy. I mean, let's call it what it is, of that fallacy. But can you imagine if someone bought a box of Surrogates and said, like, oh, they're great. The 10 of the 20 are great, or 4 of the 10 Latelier, or 5 of the 15 of the Lateliers are fantastic. I mean, it wouldn't even get off the ground. The three of us probably wouldn't even be talking.
No. Right.
It would be rightfully unacceptable.
Right.
Why are so
unfair? Yeah, go please, Casey. Go please, take it.
No. It's the beauty of using the factory we use too, and a lot of the factories that are down there have learned consistency and the love of what they do. It'd be an instant DM, and I'll never smoke your brand again if that ever happened. And we're blessed to have a factory that believes in the consistency piece. So Dan can attest to that too.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be fair, all around the market, from
absolutely,
the Dominican, Honduras, and Nicaragua, I mean, that is not an acceptable thing. I mean,
no.
I'm in my head going, I actually don't know of any brands that I'm like, yeah, dude, have you tried to smoke one of those? They don't even smoke.
Yeah. The bar set high, and it's great that we all set the bar high, right?
Yeah.
And
I think it's like expectation, right? So like the expectation of the domestic market is that it's excellence, right? It's excellence and consistency, whereas the expectation of them and the mystique behind the Cuban brand is like, oh, well, you'll get lucky if you bat your weight a little bit with those boxes.
Right.
Some interesting thoughts there. So Casey, bringing you back into the timeline here. So 2012 comes. You're not even aware of the press release that comes out. Press release comes out. You have to tell your boss that is going on. So what was the first thing in your mind as far as where this was, not where this was starting, because it obviously had started, but where did you see it going in 2012? Here we are 8 years later. Where did you see it?
Well, I think we were looking at these training wheels pretty much. We going into the show, we didn't have huge expectations. But when we left the show, we were floored. I think my brother actually sat back in his booth and kind of chuckled at the three of us working in our tiny little cubicle, writing orders left and right, writing orders, and it was gangbusters. It was great. So After that, it was hitting the road. I cut my teeth. I kind of repped where our rep Mo is now in New York, New Jersey, and learned a lot about sales in tobacco and promotion. And I can't think of a tougher market to do it in too. It was hard. It was interesting. Plus, I got to really, hear. My brother didn't have a rep in that territory, so I got to hear the either the positives or the negatives of not having a rep in that territory. So I was doing double duty. I was dabbling in the tat side and pushing or promoting our brand on the road. I did an event at oh goodness gracious, what's Mo's old hangout, Dan? I'm losing my mind.
Francisco's?
No, the one up in Union. Danny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Said it.
Senior moment here. I know.
That
So I
shop.
did an event there. What?
That shop.
That shop, right? No. Danny had me come in and do an event, and it was solely lat and surrogates, and on the lat side, it was at the time a very medium, for the market. People didn't understand it as a whole, and they're like, I only smoke full body, I only smoke strong cigars, and I'm like, okay, now I have to learn the art of introducing cigars to customers and talking the talk, and it was fun, but it's blown up from there. And that's where I go back to what we talked about earlier, the relationship piece with retailers and end consumers, and being able to openly talk about our product and the story about Pete and the story about Dan and then the story about Atelier, the workshop. And it's grown from there. So
you talk about those early events, Casey. We were talking about your events, at the very top of the show, and we were talking about this rock star mentality. Like, what were some of those first events like? I mean, did they catch you off guard with how big they were? I mean, was it kind of an eye-opening experience in that regard, or
Yeah. When I travel with Pete and Dan, it was eye-opening, because hey, listen, he's still my little brother, and when you come from Maine, and you most of the people in that little circle in Maine still think your brother owns a tobacco shop, right? And he's making pipe tobacco. No. This is a brand, and it's quite amazing to see the maturation. I learned a lot about the history of my brother's brand from just YouTubing and paying attention to guys like you and interviews with Pete. So, and Dan was a different history. Dan and I kind of hit it off when we met in Nicaragua. So it was a different beast, different relationship. So, yeah.
And I knew the product from selling it and from following it, from 2003 on as well. So,
yeah,
I became even early on when we were traveling, and it was, you're out there trying to pimp Atelier and Surrogates. It quickly became a Tatuaje venture, right? Because I could answer all of the questions about all those other lines that were sitting on the table, from Brown and Red Label and Cowboy One, the whole way through Fausto and Larry Keza and all the other stuff that was on the table at the time. And
right.
So that became my shtick, was, ask me about any of that stuff, because I know all that stuff. And
you're really promoting the factory, right?
That worked well with the reps too, because a lot of them rep other brands as well, so they might not be as versed in all of that other stuff on the table, even though they're selling it. They're versed in it, but they might not know the stories about when it started, how it started, why, what was really behind it, until they hear it again, and then they're like, yeah, that. And I was just engulfed in all that from the get-go, which which brings us, Bear, to like now that everything is all under the same umbrella, that is, you know, that does become our role. You know, it's easy because everything is a, you know, a Havana Cellars event, a Tatuaje event. So
right.
And you know, that works great. Absolutely.
You know, it's interesting because you know, my personal history with the three of you all, Dan's actually the person that I had the most interaction with initially. You guys came and did an event at Michael's, and Pete was you know, cornered by several other individuals, and Casey was also cornered by several other individuals as well. And but luckily I had the good fortune to have a conversation with Dan, and I remember walking away from that conversation thinking, just how like incredibly impressed I was with just our entire discussion revolved around flavor and flavor components. It had, I don't even think we really even talked about cigars necessarily. It was just all about our palate and exploring our palate and what cigars, you know, and what, you know, what tobaccos actually really kind of, you know, hit our palate the way that we liked. And it was by far one of the best conversations I've ever had in an event. Um, and so I think that kind of goes into the point about what you guys bring to these events that we were talking about, is that you guys have the three of y'all have very unique characteristics, and you kind of have your own very unique style about it as well. And you guys bring something very different to the table, each and every one of you. And I think that's what makes you guys very appealing overall. Um, but you guys are very open about this, and I have to commend you, because there's a lot of times when there's a departure or a parting of a party inside of a company, and it's like that person's history kind of gets erased. It's like they don't exist anymore. Like and that their key part of a company is no longer relevant, and that couldn't be further from the truth with Casper's role in the beginning of of L'Atelier, Surrogates, Tatuaje journey and everything. So talk a little bit about Casey, if you will, like what was Casper's role early on as far as with the launch of these two new brands, and how did he actually spearhead it to where it would eventually become, and we'll talk about 2018 here in a second, but and from 2012 to 2018, what role did Casper play inside of this world that you guys created?
He was the logistical guy. He was kind of the glue that kept everything together in LA for us as a small venture. So Atelier, he was micro focused on that piece. And he'd keep us engaged in that all the time. On top of getting product out the door, talking to customers on the phone. He was a pivotal part. I mean, if he wasn't there, I don't know what we have, you know, as a whole, we probably would have been engulfed by Tatuaje earlier. You know, it wasn't all, he enjoyed cigars, he knows cigars, but it was really the logistics, you know, the shipping piece, you know, the bands, you know, staying in touch with Pete constantly, you know, who is managing this massive company on one side for this small company to grow. And without Casper, I don't think the growth would have been as quick or you know, been able to been handled as well by him.
And then he was involved at the factory when we would go down, you know, on blending trips in the same way that we were. So that was the true nature of the workshop. Like Pete joked early on that, you know, every decision that we made would be, you know, it would need a majority vote, but he would always be able to break the majority if he felt that strongly about it. Right, and he never did. He never said, no, the three of you are wrong. We need to do this. He kind of went along with, okay, if you guys want to do that, let's do that. Okay. But, you know, now you've got 4 pallets, you know, down there, and you're working on a thing, and you've got 4 different personalities. Like, like if we call Pete type A, then I'm little A. And Casey and Sean both had their own realm of, nobody followed, right? Like
Right.
everybody, I was devil's advocate. I always played devil's advocate. Like,
Yep.
yeah, but was my thing, right? Like,
Yep.
like an improv troupe. Like, yeah, but such and such, right? And
Yeah.
so I was always throwing that into the realm, but none of us could be satisfied without satisfying our palates. So now you've got 4 kind of distinct palates, kind of. I mean, we had a lot of commonality, but like we, I think I've told this story 5 million times, so forgive me, but like when we were blending the Atelier Maduro, that was going to be a broadleaf stick, and we had 3 or 4 blends that Pete was trying on us, and we all tasted them. And then we all went to the factory together, and it was like, the elephant in the room was none of us were happy with any of them. We liked them, we didn't love them, and we had to love them. And so I brought up the elephant in the room and said, okay, we can release this and we'll happily release it. But we're not going to be like 100% behind it, right? And then everybody's nodding their head because tweaks needed to be made or something else needed to be tried, because it was just a broadleaf stick, and we already had broadleaf sticks in the Tatuaje umbrella, and it didn't taste like that, and it was still a medium-bodied broadleaf stick, but it was overwhelmingly broadleaf, right? And so we just started spitballing ideas, and I threw out, let's change up one of the binders. What if we put Sancti Spiritus in one of the binders? And Pete's like, I don't know what would happen. Let's try it, right? And then that became a thing. Happy accident. The bear, it's always happy accident, absolutely. Right? Like, out comes this sample with one of the 2 binder leaves being Sancti Spiritus, and all of us fell in love with it like immediately. And then I still remember playing devil's advocate, and I said, hey Pete, which one of the 2 binder leaves is Sancti Spiritus? And he's like, I'm gonna have to go ask whether they use the upper or the lower one.
Right.
And I remember Sean looking at me at the time going, what the hell? Like, why would that matter? And I laughed and I went, I only know that because I was down here with Pete when he switched 2 binders, and it made all the difference. And so I learned that, like, again, as a happy accident, as a bystander, going down to the factory with Pete, testing some blends that he was working on, just as a second palette, long before Atelier. And so I threw that out there, and he went and checked, and still to this day I forget which one it is. But because Pete said, do you want to flop them and see if it's any better? And I'm like, I don't really want to change anything. We were all like, no, this is this is the thing. This is the magic juice that we were looking for, right? But that was my point. We couldn't settle until we
walked away from there going, so barnyard hay against chocolate, right?
Yeah.
And how does that work? And it did. And to this day, that's we put it to rest. We put it on the shelf for a little while, but we'll see that again someday.
Yeah, and then that went one step further, and we were drinking and talking, and out came, what if we use Sancti Spiritus every time we do something new? Like,
exactly.
Because you've got the wrapper, you've got binder, and you've got filler. It could be in any one of those components, and that could be a marketing hook.
Yep.
Right? Like, let's always use Sancti Spiritus. That's our thing, right?
That's our thing.
At one point, we did Identite, where we did that as an event stick first, right? A 3-pack event stick. And then we wanted to release it, which we did for a while, and we've shelved that for a little while. But that had a Sancti Spiritus wrapper. One of the 2 binder leaves had Sancti Spiritus, and it was one of the leaves in the filler as well. And
all throughout
we called that Identite. Like, that's the identity of Atelier, is that we're always going to use Sancti Spiritus somewhere.
That cigar was incredible. I really loved it.
Yeah.
Speaking about the Maduro, Casey and I talked about this last time it was on Casey was on my show, and let's talk about it again for just a minute. Now I've had subsequent Maduro cigars since that have had this, but at the time, the thing that really popped in your mind, and I'll go on a limb here. I think it's the lower. By the way, if we're having trouble remembering what binder it is, I think the Sanctus Spiritus is the lower. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I think it is because the very unique characteristic of L'Atelier Maduro that I found was I've never until that point, and I've had some since that have had this characteristic, but this was the first time ever that I smoked a Maduro cigar, that the retrohale had this floral component to it that was just unbelievably unique. You just never got that out of a Maduro cigar. It didn't matter if it was San Andreas Maduro, it didn't matter if it was broadleaf Maduro, it didn't matter. I just never experienced that. And that was the thing that really grabbed my attention. Like, I remember when Tracy Spence handed me a L'Atelier Maduro for the first time, he's like, smoke it and tell me what you think. And we were smoking it together, and he's like, what do you think about that retro? And I was like, this is a Maduro. Like, I even asked him, I was like, this is a Maduro, because he gave it to me without the label on. And he's like, yes. And I was like, this is really floral. Are you getting floral? Am I just crazy? He's like, no, I get it too. He's like, isn't that crazy? And I said, yeah, it's really nuts.
Even to the extent of getting a little bit of mint every once in a while, a hint of that. And if you've never had one that's like really aged, find somebody that's got a really old box of them. Like, I'm talking like yellow cello. They are insane. I just smoked. I had 2 of the middle size. Was that a 54? Yeah.
54.
Yeah. I had 2 of them sitting in the humidor. The cello was so yellow that when you pulled it off, the band came right with it. And
it's always a good feeling.
What happens with aged broadleaf is that chocolate, that milk chocolate, that oily goodness that we love about dark broadleaf, it backs off. The oils dissipate some over time, and it still has a chocolate flair, but it's like baking chocolate instead of milk chocolate.
Right.
So it's lighter, like cocoa powder, right? Very light, but it's distinctly chocolate, and it's a whole different experience. And I'm talking 3-4 years on something like that. And actually, that's my note on kind of all the broadleaf stuff. So even the Tatuaje broadleaf series, like when we originally did those suitcases years ago, sticks out of those right now are stupid. But they're totally different because of that. But yes, part of that is that it was a medium-bodied cigar, with those kind of accents in it. It was not the Atelier blend. It was none of the blends that we had at the time, but the philosophy of it was the same. It's there's no Ligero in there, right? And they're all just flavor leaves and lower priming flavorful leaves. So and then you wrap it in something that is something completely unexpected, right? An oily, juicy broadleaf bomb.
Absolutely.
So going back to Casper's role within the company, Dan. So like I wanted to get your reaction on this. So in 2018, just before the merger happens, Casper leaves the company formally, at least. He's still involved in Saints and Sinners, as we talked about. You all obviously knew about this before the rest of us did. Dan, knowing the intricate part that he played in your Surrogates early success, and obviously L'Atelier's early success and everything, what were your concerns about his departure? What was your reaction like?
Well, I kind of thought that where we were going was, that it was inevitable that we roll everything together. I mean, because when we talked in the green room, one of the things that I said was we had clients that, they would bring in Atelier, but they might have only needed 4, 5, 6 boxes from our side. but they were ordering 20, 25 boxes of Tatuaje at the time. And since their sales rep was there, you know, they're like, oh yeah, and I need, you know, 3 boxes of Lat 52s and, you know, 2 boxes of Bone Crushers, whatever, right? They're like, okay, well, I got to put that on another form, right? And then it shipped separately. They paid shipping. Yeah, I mean, it was a totally different entity. And especially the smaller guys were like, man, can't you just ship it together so, you know, we can save on shipping? And we're like, well, we're just not built up that way. You know, it's got its own set of books, and, you know, it does ship out of the same building, but someone else is doing it. So no, we can't really do that. So I think we all kind of thought the same thing, which is, you know, as much as, you know, that was a setback, as you're, you know, as you're saying, we all went, okay, well, the way around this is, you know, kind of where we're heading anyways, which is just lop this stuff all together. This is the time to do, and that's what happened.
Really, and realistically, you know, we have brokers in most of our territories. I think we have 2 in-house guys, and it was just an easier load for them to handle too. Less, you know, less paperwork. It was streamlined. You know, I think they lost a little of the communication piece from the Atelier side, because Casper was very accessible on the phone to all the retailers, but they already knew what they got with Tatuaje, so it was an easy. I think it was an easy transition.
Yeah, I mean, look at it this way: Tatuaje was always already spilling over to a second sheet of paper as far as the price list is concerned, right?
Yep.
So now a retailer is looking at it, and that second page is full, but they were used to looking at 2 pages already. And our, you know, our price sheet is still 2 pages long in such a small font that I need to get my reading glasses out to see it. and on top of that, Pete, you know, decided to, you know, put some stuff on hiatus. You know, earlier, before that merge happened, Larry Queza, El Triunfador, and Ambos Mundos were three brandings that all went and, you know, away for a while. Well, they're still away, but they could always come back.
Laura Queza, that was so sad for me when Laura Queza left. I was heartbroken back there. That's so incredible.
Everybody says that, and all the guys that work in shops, that was one of their favorites. It was kind of that thing that when it came into the shop, they'd smoke, but they never really sold them. They smoked them for themselves. It was kind of hilarious.
Guilty.
But, I hear you.
And that's Pete's wife's favorite too, is to my understanding as well. She said that I heard her say that was the best cigar that Pete's ever made too. So, but Casey, like, you know, but when you heard when Casper told you, or when Pete told you that Casper was leaving or anything, what was your reaction to his leaving? Like, I guess how did that impact you?
Well, I mean, my day-to-day was communicating with Dan and Casper, so we did kind of lose that communication line. But I mean, our communication with Pete was upped, so it was seamless. You know, there's a lot of just little things that Casper always brought to the fold that was missed. You know, that logistical piece was so good. You know, he was in merch before that, so he could handle the high stress of the daily, and he was the calming influence. You know, like I said earlier, he was kind of the glue for us. And, you know, those are the things that kind of scared me, but it wasn't like we were jumping off a pier into this big ocean. It was this, you know, we're dabbling into this new venture, which is a merger into goodness now.
Yeah, and by that time, you know, Casey and I being on the road, we were representing the whole portfolio.
Absolutely.
Ours, and, you know, except it was ours and, you know, Havana Cellars. We were, like I alluded to, that I kind of always was in that realm. We were full on. That was our role at that point. We were out with the sales reps. you know, on behalf of both companies, whatever, but it felt like we were just doing what we, you know, continued to do after, which is represent all the above things. So
Right.
So it sounds to me like the dynamic really, well, this is a huge absence, and this was a huge gap. And, you know, Casey even mentioned the word, you know, fear a little bit there of uncertainty, but it doesn't sound like the dynamic changed too much with the merger and the loss of one of y'all's key components in Casper.
It was a loss, but it was a transition, I guess. That's the biggest thing. And it wasn't a horrible transition in a positive or negative way. It was just part of doing business. And at that point, the industry was changing a little bit too. So because there was a ton on the market at that point in time. So we were that merger as a whole worked for us, I think. Dan?
yeah, you know, and one of the other things that the progression was going there anyways, but it's gone there further now, is that you know, the two of us get pulled into Pete's world a little more, or a lot more really, with, you know, everything that's getting released. It's everything. It's not just hey, what are you guys doing on your side, right? You know, Pete had two hats on.
Yes, he did.
He had his Havana Cellars hat, and then he had his Atelier hat with us. And then, so now, like you know, Pete, Casey, and I all have a Havana Cellars hat on, right? And so Pete's like, hey, what do you think about, you know, bringing this out next year, or, you know, that kind of stuff, which we might have been asked about, but now it's, you know, it's really part of, you know, more of our job function, I think.
Right. I agree.
You know, Dan, we talked about this in the green room, and I think you made a pretty good point that I'd like you to talk about. So this is a question that I've been asking recently, and I think it's poignant considering the company that I have right now. You know, when you guys released y'all's brands, you know, when Surrogates, when you first got your first shipment of Surrogates, and when Casey first saw the first shipment of L'Atelier, I mean, what was that? I mean, these weren't your cigars anymore. They were sold to somebody else. But when you opened up that box and you were going to ship it off for the very first time to someone, you mentioned that this was, you know, again, logistically speaking, is more Casper's role and everything. But what was that feeling like when you saw the fruits of your labor, and it was in your hands at one second and out the door the next? Like, what was that feeling like?
My strong recollection when you asked that question was the factory, because we were down there when they were first packaging some of that stuff, right? And I remember sitting there with my phone and my camera just taking pictures, because this thing that you created and came up with as a group is now being packaged. It's like, that's the product, right?
Right.
The first shipment that would have came up from Nicaragua landed in LA and got unboxed and put on the shelves and getting ready to be shipped. That would have been all visceral experience for, you know, Casper, because, you know, he would have boxed up that first order that was going out to a retailer, and then Casey and I would have seen that side of it as it was on a retailer's shelf. So we have that memory as well. But
and it was I you know, again, my degree was in education, and Dan and I have talked about this before, and it's the educational piece. We're on boots on the ground in the shops, educating not just the end consumer, the retailer, and our reps as a whole. We talked about that earlier too. So that's a big piece. That's kind of the role that we fit into now a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I mean, so now that you guys are several years in now, I mean, does that feeling ever get old?
No, not at all.
It's still special, even time, you know, every time.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, when the new Ateliers came in, and of course I got a shipment of them in, you know, like 3 sets of boxes, right? and I hadn't actually. Well, Pete had sent us pictures of the bands, but I hadn't physically seen the band because it got created, sent down to Nicaragua, and up comes this shipment, and you saw how the new packaging. So even just that 2 months ago was that same kind of experience. Was like, oh my God, check this out! And I'm taking snapshots of them, sending them to Casey because he hadn't actually seen,
I mean, this was all
packaging.
COVID that we started the design of the band and whatnot, and this was all planned before, and then kind of not a hold up, but it got pushed back a little bit into late October release, November release.
If all three of us were in Miami, because Pete's in Miami now, but go back a couple of years, if all three of us were in LA, we would have seen that sample of paper product and all that kind of stuff. Pete saw it, he sent it to us, and but you didn't actually see we didn't actually see this new band until it was actually on a cigar. So
it's gorgeous. I love it. I absolutely love it.
So that's kind of what you're getting at. You visualize this stuff, but until you see it all in one unit, right, with the paper in it and the ribbons and all that kind of stuff, that's why if you see it at the factory while it's happening, there's an experience there. In this sense, we didn't go down at all this year. So here it was, you're either seeing it in a shop, or if you're, for me, I was lucky enough that I had it coming in as well.
Right.
Plus Pete's been sending me all the new stuff to take pictures of. So
yeah.
Dan, I can't wait to have you, because there's a lot more things that I'd love to explore with Surrogates, but I don't want to keep you guys too late, and we're already creeping up late as it is. But I did want to go into our next subject, which of course is one of the fun segments that I love to do, and we've been doing it now for over 6 months here on ELOSOFUMARTAKES, and that's our One Must Go segment. And as always, it's always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana and distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. So smoke one today and start living united. Now, gentlemen, I told you about the concept of this segment, and as my audience knows, it can be really fun, and then it can be really difficult, and sometimes it can be heartbreaking, because I'm asking you to get rid of something. And so I was thinking, I try to mold this after my guests, tastes or likes or dislikes and things, and so I thought this was kind of interesting take, considering your the three of you guys have very unique characteristics, but there's likes that kind of have brought you all together. And so I thought of three things, and so one of these has to go. Okay, so here are your three things to choose from. You can never own another dog.
Oh boy.
You can never create another cigar brand, or you can never drink another glass of bourbon. Which one goes?
I'd let the bourbon go.
Yeah, me too.
Pretty easy from both y'all.
Yeah, no, the bourbon is a big thing that I could let go.
As much as we both like that, I've got replacements for that.
Exactly.
I've got wine, beer, scotch.
Dan's already taken inventory of his liquor cabinet. He's like, oh, I'm good.
Absolutely. I feel the same way. I get the wine piece. I got other alcohols that I could do, but the bourbon can go. I couldn't live without a dog, and I definitely enjoy what we're doing as a group. The bourbon.
That's a great question, though.
It is.
So I'll call a quick audible here. So let's just say drink another glass of anything alcoholic. Would it still be that one?
I got coffee. I got coffee.
What about you, Dan? If I call that audible, what is it still the same? Is it still the same choice?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, because in the morning
I smoke a hell of a lot more than I drink. So
yeah.
And again, just the you know, again, back to what you were getting at, which is the excitement of, you know, this new thing, and just you know, everything involved with what we're doing and the industry in general. Yeah, I'd give up drinking. Like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, this
As fun as it is, I don't need that.
right. You know, again, the dog piece is the dog piece. I'm a dog owner. Dan's a dog owner. The bourbon, the alcohol can go, but there's just so much fun working with, you know, Pete and Dan, just trying new things out, talking about implementation into the market, you know, just so much fun. And working with the factory that we work with is tremendous also. The Garcias have just, you know, I had one of my sales reps in Florida say the other day, he goes, dude, the tobacco is just amazing right now. And I had to agree with him. It's the tobacco is talking right now.
I got to throw an audible out, Casey.
Yeah.
If we give up alcohol, we might not have as many great ideas.
I was just about to say that, Dan. You took the words out of my mouth, because I hear about all these brainstorming sessions, and they're all over a bottle of wine or something.
They are definitely, they are. Yeah, they
seriously,
are.
the Animal Cracker probably was the drunkest we had been in a long time, and I think the sales manager for the Northeast for my father was sick in his bedroom in Nicaragua, and Dan and I are outside of the patio next to him, and we're just going on for hours.
At one point, we were sitting on the floor in the hallway of what was it? What's the old hotel? Los Arcos.
Yeah,
that was an old.
No. We were not staying there. It was the Dry Hotel. I can't even remember what it was. We ended up.
Oh, you're right.
Drunk.
You're right. It was the other one.
Yeah, I can't remember.
That's the only time. That's the only time we ever stayed there.
Yep.
And they wouldn't let us drink there. So.
Nope, we were already drunk. We got back from the farm and we had enough to drink at that point.
And so we had been blending this big 6x60, and you know, Animal Cracker was definitely one of the names that was being thrown around. But I had a list on my phone of like 20 stupid names that we had thrown out, and we went back to the factory the next day, and I was reading down through them all, and everybody was like, yeah, oh, that's good. Yeah, no, that's good. And then Animal Cracker, and I was like, yeah, nothing beats that, really. It has to be that.
Hands down.
So, as my audience knows, I experienced, Dan, what you unfortunately experienced prior to the release of AKC this past September. I lost my best girl, my dog. We had to put her down, and it was it still hurts to this day. And it probably will hurt for probably years to come and everything. But I really like what you and Pete have really done by just carrying on the legacy of what our best friends have meant to us.
Yeah.
You know, talk about the AKC for just a second, because I know it's a very special and personal project for you. What was it like, you know, after seeing what Pete was able to do with his brand in, you know, immortalizing his best friend? What was it like for you to release the AKC to the public?
It was the same. That was a box that when it showed up, that was a tearjerker, right? Seeing and opening that first box of those was, you know, kind of like walk out of the room, and then go back in and get one to smoke it. But the project itself, you know, I told Pete when we had to put Kenji down, I said, you know, I'm gonna have to do a Kenji cigar, right? And he went, yeah, definitely. And so we started talking about what kind of blend we would want to do and all that kind of stuff. And he got some samples up, and he's like, what are you going to call this? And I said, AKC. Well, he always thought AKC meant a Kenji cigar, but to me, it was the perfect surrogate name, because Kenji was a Mastador. He was Mastiff and Labrador, but we got him from the pound as a puppy, so we had no idea what he really was. They were calling him a Mastiff mix, right? but the vet was immediately like, no, this is a mastador. They actually breed them that way. And so the fact that he could have never been an AKC registered, dog, because they don't, they
unless they're purebred, they don't
they
recognize them. Yeah.
So that was like the perfect name for me, was like a pun on AKC. But it was, weeks after we decided that we were doing that Pete's like, holy crap, I always just thought you meant that meant a Kenji cigar. And I'm like, well, see, that was like the perfect name then, right? It's double entendre.
Right.
I was smoking that cigar with a few folks, and they were talking about how their preference over that versus the animal cracker. And I was like, you can't do that. I was like, you can't.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to speak for Dan here, but you can't. You can't compare the two, because this one's deeply personal to him, and it's a different entity altogether.
Yeah, I mean, everything came about like, he was a reverse brindle, so black with brown instead of the light brindle. And Pete and I started talking about wrappers, and I'm like, do we have any San Andreas wrapper that's like really muddled, like almost ugly? And he was like, not really, man. And I'm like, yeah, but still, San Andreas just kind of has that feel about it, right?
Yep.
It tastes muddled, right? It's got grit to it. It's sandy and whatnot. And I didn't want to do another 6x60 because I wanted it to be my cigar, and I don't smoke 6x60 that much at all either. I'm like you, but I still wanted it to be big. I mean, he was a big blocky guy, so everything about that made sense. And Animal Cracker is the base of the blend. It's just tweaked to match San Andreas some more. So
absolutely
awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you. That was our one must go segment. As always,
that was easy.
Yeah, easy one. Easily, no contemplating whatsoever. But
still interesting though, and I still got to go back to, I don't know how many great ideas we have without drinking it all, but we'd get there.
And as always, One Must Go is always brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, and the highly Garofalo and the highly acclaimed Atabey and Byron lines. So smoke one today and start living united. And rest assured, everyone, while they would give away alcohol very easily, this is not a real thing. They're great ideas still to come from the folks at Havana Cellars for sure. So goes into our next segment here is, we were talking about this recent thing that on ELOSOFUMARTAKES, what I've been asking my guests to do is spotlight something very personal to them. And that, of course, is charities and nonprofits. And it started on my birthday just a couple months ago, where I've really been inspired by a lot of conversations and a lot of folks in this industry to give back in a way. And I really have been contemplating on this for a long time. Like, how can I take this show and utilize it in that fashion? And so it kind of came to me rather organically, and it's been beautiful so far. We've been able to spotlight some incredible charities, and this tonight will be no different. So I asked my guest tonight if they would like to spotlight a couple of charities, and unfortunately it was a little last minute, but they were very much on board with bringing some light to a couple of charities. One that we've actually featured already, which I'm really excited to talk to Dan about here in just a minute. But Casey, you actually wanted to choose a spotlight, a very popular charity. I'll talk a little bit about it, but then I want to hear from you on why you chose it. And that, of course, is the Salvation Army. Now, the Salvation Army is a very widely renowned a charity that's been around for over 150 years. It started in 1865. So it's been around for 155 years and it was founded by William and Catherine Booth. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the Salvation Army is actually a church. It's not just a charity, it's actually a church. And their claim to fame, if you will, is, what they do is it's a movement. It's an invaluable part of the Universal Christian Church. Its message is based on the Bible, but its ministry is motivated to help anyone, whenever, wherever, and however possible. An incredible incredibly daunting task when you think about all the needs in this world. And
Absolutely.
they spotlight everything, including around this time of year, the Rescue Christmas um,
Hmm.
initiative. But they also do disaster relief, homeless shelters, food pantries, grassroots
Hmm.
service, camps, drug and alcohol rehabs, spiritual healing, job training, services for the aging, veteran services, after school programs. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. It is just an incredible organization. So Casey, why did you choose the Salvation Army, and what motivated you to kind of spotlight them tonight?
Well, I mean, we've seen them. Their Rescue Christmas piece has been synonymous. I mean, people know that.
The Red
But
Kettles, man.
what? Yeah, absolutely. And realistically, Frank Stelzer, we used to do the turkey trot with him, and this is actually the first year we haven't. And he has always donated, and he brought it to my attention that it is, when given locally, it hits that market or it hits that area, and it's not spread out nationally. It's specific, and I think that's important. And for me, when you spread it out too thin, and their causes are so good, I mean, it's well rounded. It's an important piece for me when it comes to that. So.
Have you been able to get involved with the Salvation Army there locally in Maine? Is that?
No. My parents have. My dad has worked with the school systems, helping that as a whole. But no, not really. This is the first real holiday period where it's been a teaching tool for my kids, teaching my kids about giving back and giving locally. And I just find it that because they keep it so local, it's important. You look at charities like Goodwill and whatnot, which is a different beast. This one's true, and it's been around for a huge amount of time, and it's shown its impact.
It's an incredible organization. I'm really excited about it.
Absolutely.
And as always, gentlemen, you guys may not know about this, but I've pledged. I don't know how long I'll be able to keep this going because I don't have an enormous amount of money, but
Mm-hmm.
I've pledged that as long as I keep this going, that I'll be donating a small amount to each charity that's spotlighted on
That's cool.
this show. So
very cool.
Really encourage everyone to donate. It was on the advertisement earlier tonight. If you go on our Facebook page, you can go and donate. Click the donate button if you feel so called. A great organization. They, as I listed off several of their efforts around the world and around your community. Particularly now with this season and everything, the Red Kettles are synonymous, as you mentioned, with them and everything. And it's a beautiful organization. Including an organization, Dan, that you chose to spotlight tonight. Now, this has been spotlighted before by Bradley Rubin, who was on a couple weeks ago. But this one was, you had some really interesting points on it. The World Central Kitchen, which I'm a big advocate for world hunger. I think it's one of the worst plagues that plague our world that we live in. Hunger goes into so many things. It's not just children going hungry around the world. It's when people go hungry, that it's not just their livelihood, but it's also everything about it. If a child isn't energized and fueled with food, their education suffers, their life suffers. There's just so many things that kind of go into it. Why were you drawn to the World Central Kitchen specifically, and what was it about this organization that drew you in and wanted you to, and that caused you to bring a spotlight on it tonight?
So Jose Andres, who founded it, when you hear him speak about the different things that they do, right? Whether it's flocking, well, dude, they flocked down to, you know, all the areas that were hit with, you know, severe storms and whatnot, and they just set up kitchens. And you know, that was oh wow, way back in when Puerto Rico got hit.
Puerto Rico.
You know, that's I think that's the first time that it really that I caught wind of it. But most recently, I just saw an interview with him where he was talking about, you know, here in the United States right now, what's going on with everyone being out of work and people who have never asked for food ever. I mean, you see on the national news the North Dallas food co-op, whatever that organization is that's doing that. The lines are crazy, man. It's like people trying to get into a football game. It's bumper to bumper.
Right.
And you know, they're SUVs and, you know, expensive cars and down and out cars. And I mean, and I'm like, those are people in cars that can sit there and wait for hours waiting to get food because they need food, right? Now he's not in, to my knowledge, that organization isn't involved with that particular thing. It's just an example of how much of a need there is right now, and especially with the holidays. And a couple of the points that really stuck out to me that he talks about are restaurants. You know, Casey and I just had this conversation about, you know, restaurants being shut down and how they're ever dreaming of coming back, right? They're on that cusp where so many of them are definitely not coming back. And he makes this point that there are farmers in the country that are overturning potatoes, throwing them out, right? Because they don't have the buyers for them. There are milk producers that are just chugging out milk. Like we joke about, oh my God, my local brewery, you know, doesn't have, the bars are closed. So they're just dumping, you know, a bunch of barrels of brew because, you know, they've got a canning facility, but they don't have that much distribution. They relied on these bars, right? So they're hurting in that realm. But that's like rich people problem. That your local, you know, feel bad for the local breweries because I'm a beer nut, but like that's not an everyday person problem.
Yeah, it's not a staple.
Everyday person problem is someone who needs food, right. And one of his, you know, big things that they're trying to do is get local restaurants in local areas to keep at it by producing meals for people who need meals. And so the money, so they're taking money that they're getting donated to their organization, and they're spending it on local restaurants to create lunches and dinners that people can pick up or be delivered by, you know, by their charity, and given back to that industry, which in turn gives back to these farmers who are dumping food. I mean, you listen to it and you're like, it's nuts. There are people producing food, and there are people that need food, and this shit's getting dumped, and these people are going hungry in the United States. I mean, let alone everything that they do around the world, right? I mean, this is a big organization, but it's kind of nuts what they do around the world. But when he talks about just America and what's needed right now, I mean, it's heart-wrenching, but it's also a brilliant take on, you know, I mean, one of his latest interviews that I saw was, you know, he was talking about, you know, COVID relief in general. And he's like, imagine if we had a piece of that money coming back through an organization like this. Why can't the government do what we're doing? Why can't they allocate money, pay local restaurants to stay in business because they're actually paying them for their business? It's not a handout. They're saying, keep producing meals, right? Keep buying from your distributors and from your farmers locally and produce these meals. And we, or you, if you know, had the wherewithal to put a program like this together, would be in charge of getting that food out to the people who actually need it. And
Right.
it's just a brilliant concept, but that's the nature of that organization, is thinking outside of a normal old fashioned box of, yeah, I gave some money to, these people, right? Or the government's going to give the milk producer a subsidy because he had to dump milk. Well, that's not the problem. The problem is people need milk. you need the farmer needs to be paid for the product, and the product needs to go somewhere. That's just normal business, reoriented to the need. We don't need to take government money and give this guy a subsidy because he's forced, to dump his product and he can't sell it. Give him a place to sell it. That's his business.
Right.
That's what he wants to do. And
And
this person down here is in need, so take care of it. And so they are doing that. But one of his bigger points is, we shouldn't have to be doing this. We should be doing this as a country. And so yeah, like you, I kind of did the nosedive into the organization, and I mean, everything that they touch is gold right now. But
and his ability to think outside the box in these situations, which our country, our industry, any of this has been able to do, is to think outside the box and do things differently.
Yeah.
This adversity that we're handling right now is amazing.
Hear that?
And so I just mostly, Bear, I thought, how timely, right? That's why. When I thought about it, I thought, I don't know how long you had been doing it, but I'll bet someone has brought it up already. And so I wasn't surprised when you told me in the green room that someone had. And I'm like, still though, it's coming up. We're 2 weeks away from holiday meals, going into the new year, and there are plenty of local organizations that do this kind of thing, but they're trying to do more of it, and they're trying to do it in a way that benefits not just the people in need, but people that are in their regular businesses are suffering.
No, Bear brought it up earlier about food pantries and places like that have been kind of just ravaged because of this, and kids. So my son works with the Activate group, which is kind of work with Key Club. It's the younger group of Key members, and they started a food pantry in the school for kids to be able to access at all times, which is awesome. And again, thinking outside the box. This was started before COVID hit, and now it's more important than ever.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think it's also very telling. I saw a story earlier this week that the number one commodity that is being stolen off of shelves in this country now is baby food.
Wow, really?
And that's scary. That's scary. Yeah, exactly. That's a frightening statistic when you think about it. I mean, there are like I said, world hunger is something is a passion of mine, because it leads to so many things. Hunger leads to so many problems, and solving that can solve a lot of the other subsequent problems. Not that we shouldn't focus our efforts everywhere, but even in this country specifically, there are thousands upon thousands, millions of children that are going hungry each night, and where baby food is the number one thing getting stolen.
Yeah. Well, you look at what school districts are doing now. They're teaching virtually, but they're still servicing kids with lunches being brought to a central meeting point to pick up. Buses are going out to their first drop spot and meeting families and kids, and they're not just serving lunch; they're packing dinners too, and they're having breakfast on the front run. So it's amazing how much need there is out there.
Yeah, Casey, you mentioned that early this year, like March, April timeframe, when the schools closed the first time. You said that your school district said, okay, well, we have bus drivers, and they can't work, so we can keep them working. We have lunch workers, we can keep them working, and we have kids on food programs, and why can't the bus drivers go deliver it? And it was a couple weeks after that I heard that locally here that they were going to do that. And
Yeah.
the first time I heard it though was you and your school district.
Yeah, and one of the things is it is budgeted, right? So the school districts are saving money on gas. You know, they're not busing teams all over the place and whatnot. So they can pigeonhole this to something where these kids, I mean, it's hard enough learning, you know, remotely for these kids. I have a 16-year-old that's struggling with it, you know, smart kid, but this isn't his cup of tea. And you know, we don't need, but I know that he knows a lot of classmates that are in need, and he feels for them, and it's hard, you know. So it's amazing what, you know, school leaders, town leaders, you know, state leaders are figuring out on the go, on the job training, right? It is pretty special.
I'm just the thing that I'm really inspired by each week is that each week I've been met with different charities, or in this case a couple of repeats, and it really brings to light a lot of different issues, for one, but also brings to light that we are in a really fortunate position. You talk about your schools in y'all's communities. My community in the what we call the HEB area, which is Hearst, Euless, Bedford, which is where Michael's is in Euless, and it's a school district, and they were doing meal programs. They still are doing meal programs where you can pick up meals, and you don't even have to have children. I'm technically eligible. I have children, and I could go pick up meals at these schools. And my wife and I are fortunate, thank God. We're both still in work. You know, we both still have jobs, and we're able to provide for our family, which we're incredibly fortunate for. But it's terrific to see that families that don't even have children that are attending school yet be able to feed their families, and it's really great that we're seeing that. And to Dan's point about World Central Kitchen is that there's still more work to be done, a lot more work to be done, and we can. So thank you both for featuring the Salvation Army and the World Central Kitchen tonight. I really do appreciate it. This has been a fantastic portion. So if you guys feel called, please donate to it. I'm going to drop them here. We're going to pull up the links here in just a second, and I'm going to drop them in the chat. I would love for you guys to consider, my audience to consider donating to these two great organizations for all the reasons that we spotlighted here just a moment ago. What a great opportunity it is to do that. So World Central Kitchen, and I just dropped that link inside the chat, and then the Salvation Army. You can donate locally, okay? So you can actually just type in your zip code or city or state. It's at the very top of the screen, and donate there to your local community. And it's just awesome what these two organizations have brought to our communities. And so keep up the good work, everybody. And we really we're with those. If you are in need, here's a couple of organizations that can definitely help you out as well. So so thank you, gentlemen, very much appreciated.
I think it's absolutely great that you have this as a feature on your show now, because and I hope that you keep doing it. And I would bet, without going back and watching every other show, I would bet that what you're seeing is, what we all know is this industry is very charitable. Whether it's us who are still employed, and the guys out there who watch this and pay attention and are fans of all of our brands and whatnot, that are still fortunate enough to be able to support their hobby and whatnot. They're the most generous folks we've met in life. They help each other, they give to each other in times of need, and it's not just that. I mean, I think everybody's got a big heart, and you see that with the industry leaders a lot, and then you see it with the individual hobbyist. They're just that kind of person, and it kind of, it makes sense. It goes with everything about this hobby. I mean, your local shop, the disparate type of people that gather and have this in common, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all have that story. It's like, yeah, I can't imagine hanging in a cigar shop, man. Those are all just going to be a bunch of old crunchy guys that I have nothing in common with, and it couldn't be more further from that, right?
It's that
100%.
far-reaching piece too. Yeah, it does reach. I mean, this does tend to do that.
Yeah, it levels the playing field like nothing else in this world. It really does. And what Facebook's doing really great is when you tag this donation tag onto your posts and everything, what we've been able to see is you can donate as little as $5 to these organizations. I mean, that's incredible that you can donate a little bit, and it can go a long ways, a little bit here, a little bit there. And that's hopefully what my little bit does, because again, I'm not made of money. And when I pledged to do this, I talked to my wife about it, and she thought it was a really incredible idea. She's like, "How much are we going to be donating?" I was like, "Well, it won't be much at one time, but we'll be spreading it around quite a bit." And she really liked that idea, so it was really great for us to do.
And it's the education piece with your kids too, learning to give your time, your money to people in need at that point in time. And that's the one thing that I love about working with young kids and learning about this too. My son he's done multiple things, whether it's food bank, Christmas tree sales, whatever, in this hard time. And these kids are learning on the go, and they're learning that it's important, which is great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So to get back to Havana Cellars here, I wanted to take a moment to see reflecting on y'all's careers individually. This is, I'm sure this is very hard to identify, but what would you describe, KC, as the key moment in your career in the premium cigar industry? What would it be? And this is it's a very open-ended question. It can have several interpretations. So I'm asking for your individual interpretation of it. What's the key moment? One of your key moment in the industry? What would you describe it as?
Well, been kind of so many. I mean, the key moment. I learned a lot on the job, and learning from retailers, learning from end consumers, learning from Dan, learning from Pete. The education piece has been key. Seeing the growth and the maturation, finding my way. Those are key things for me. Not one thing stands out.
Mm-hmm.
Just it's a culmination that, my dad's a teacher, right? And it's all about education and learning. And as the growth of the brand, Pete has his thing, but we're under this umbrella. The growth of what we're doing has just been tremendous. So
you still coach, right?
Yeah, I still coach. I guess that kind of was my role, coaching the reps, right? From day one. So, to be better salesmen. They're all great salesmen. They have these jobs for a reason, but learning to do new things and trying new things. So yeah, I guess, yeah, the coaching piece tends to lend into it, but the body of work has just been amazing for me. It's a little bit different. For Dan, it's probably a little more surgical and pointed. I'm full body. There's that type A for Dan where I'm a little more broad. So yeah, it's hard to pinpoint any one thing that's been that aha, but working with my brother, been amazing, to be honest with you. There's been days where, we can say otherwise, but it's been pretty amazing to see this family thing grow. So
recently celebrated his 50th birthday. We can't let that go by without mentioning
Yeah,
that.
I was hoping to get this background thing so I could post the picture that I did on Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, pretty amazing. It's a great milestone for him, and he's matured very much like his wine, nicely.
What about you, Dan? What's that key moment for you?
So far, other than just uh, being brought into the fold that we're in, I think being brought into the fold of the Garcia family.
Yeah.
I still have a memory of being at the factory early on with Pete, and we were in the room with Jaime, and he was speaking in Spanish to Pete, and then he started, saying some things in English, and it was about one of the blends and something that we were working on, and he stopped himself, and he just kind of glanced over, and Pete followed what he was getting at, which is, hey, this guy's in the room, right? And Pete just looked at him, and he's like, no, mi hermano, family. And then he just, that was it. He just accepted that and went right on saying what he was going to say, which was, something internal that you wouldn't want some outsider hearing, right? And from that moment forward, it was like, yep, you're part of the family now. And again, that was early on. That was before Atelier. I was just a guest at the factory with Pete.
Right.
And, I was on the trip with him, but still, it stood out that, like, when you get brought into that family, and I think, they're not the only, it's not the only family in the industry. I think everybody kind of has that same old fashioned, you're part of us kind of feel. It's not this cutthroat, like, hey, I worked here, now I'm going to go work there, and hey, that guy offered me more money, I'm going to go take that job. That's the business world. That's what we escaped from. I hated that, right? I hated that whole concept of, like, there's no loyalty, there's no anything, right? So I still think that probably would stand out to me as, there's,
and that's early on, because I felt that too.
yeah.
And this industry is very much still done on a handshake, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And not many industries can say that. And it's pretty cool.
So I'm going to bring up this picture that you were talking about, Casey. This is it, right?
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
I had a moment where I was trying to decide if this was real or not, and I looked very closely at the photo. First of all, the pose is uncanny, right? It's spot on. Was this okay? So this picture, this portrait of Pete there on the right, was this just his natural pose, or was this intentional? Because it's the same pose.
It is. That's who he is. That's the body posture. That's how he's always been.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It's pretty cool.
Love the tie.
He was, and the tie. I got another picture that I'll share sometime later. I've been keeping it special for a while. It was something that he did with my grandmother's jacket and a glove. I'll give you a hint of that, right? One glove.
So already getting a kick out of it.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So, but that was Pete. He had that swag. He, again, youngest of three. Elbows at the table. We lived on a prep school campus when my dad first moved to Maine. So, we had the rule of the roost. We walked the whole campus, which was expansive, and you were always welcomed by the students and the other faculty members. We had 200 babysitters on campus, so we're always. But Pete had that special little persona, and that's who he is, and that there's another picture of him. He has drinking some juice. Back in the day, it was the Duke of Juice and the King of Crackers. There was another kid that they hung out, and they were two friends, thick as thieves, always together. It's pretty cool. So, but yeah, that picture hit me that night before his birthday. I was just like, damn, that is uncanny.
So Dan, I'm gonna step away for just 1 second, but you were talking to me about in the green room about some of your upcoming projects for L'Atelier and Surrogates. Why don't you share that with our audience real quick? I'm gonna step away for just a second, and I'll be right back. But I want you to share that if you don't mind.
So just 2 months ago, so you're probably just seeing them out on the shelves now, are what we were alluding to earlier, which is the Atelier Selection Special, the one with the darker wrapper, in the original 3 lat sizes, lat 52, lat 54, and lat 56. So those are out and about now. We have shipping tomorrow to retailers is 2 different Robusto sets. One is a Tatuaje Robustos Exclusivos. So six Tatuaje blends, all in a 5x50 Robusto. And out of those 6, the only thing that actually is in a production stick is the Havana 6. It's a Noblesse. So there's a Havana 6 in there, but there's a brown label, and there's a Cab I Juan, and there's a Hibero, which is the new Avitas Hibero, a Tatuaje black label, and a Fausto, all at the 5x50 size. And so we did the same thing and called it Surrogates 6-pack. And out of that collection, there's one, the Animal Cracker AC 550 that we alluded to. It's in there as a regular 5x50 Robusto. The AC 550 is a 5x50, but it has a Fuma head on the top, and but it smokes the same. But the other 5 Surrogates that are in there are all in this 5x50 Robusto, and it shows them off. It shows off those projects in a completely different way. Same with the Tatuaje ones. So those are shipping out to retailers this week, just in time, hopefully, for you to walk in and grab it for the holidays.
Merry Christmas.
And that's going to be those are going to keep, that's regular production, but we won't see it. We won't see another shipment of them probably until February.
Right.
The Vitolo is really interesting to me, Dan, because I heard an interview once that you did where you talked about your affinity for Robustos in other lines. This is when during your smoking journey, I'll call it. I'll say, has that always been a Vitolo that you've gravitated towards, or is it?
It early on it was. So when I first got into cigars, that seemed to be the size that that I acclimated to. But what changed, and it probably changed during that period where I was trying to go through those brands from Cuba in all of their sizes and make my way through that. That's when I started realizing, and this is a big soapbox for me, and that's why I encourage everybody when something new comes out, like when Tatuaje Black Label came out, if what you did was go to that size of cigar that you tend to smoke a lot of, you're probably missing your favorite one in a certain line. And so that's my soapbox is, you might have an acclivity towards a Robusto, or even I like Bellicosos as well, more than Torpedoes, but I don't dislike Torpedoes. But in a certain blend, and this goes not just for our brands, but other people's brands as well, I'm always surprised that my favorite cigar out of that lineup of 6 or 7 Vitolas is not the one that I probably would first buy, right? So I'm in a shop, there's a new line from another company, and I'm like, oh yeah, give me the whatever, right? Whatever I've been smoking size-wise a lot of now. I'll try it in that. And if somebody knows me well and they've smoked through all of them, they'll be like, nah, man, try this one. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't, I'm in the mood for more of a smoke, right? A bigger size. And they're like, yeah, but it really rules at this size. And then I'm like, yeah, that's my soapbox, right? I got to smoke through all of them. So I try to do that rather than just, rate something new based on having smoked one of them. Because there are certain lines where, not really a 6x60, but like something bigger. Like I just smoked the Lat Special Selection in the 56. That's a big cigar for me, 6.5 by 56. But when I smoked through all three of them, Casey asked me, he's like the 52, and I went, that's the first one I smoked. It's almost a Robusto. And I said, and it really stood out. And then I smoked the 54 and it didn't stand out as much to me. And then I smoked the 56 and I'm like, holy crap, that might be my favorite of the three. And then I went back and smoked another 54 and went, yeah, I like it as much. But I would have thought I'm not even gonna like this big 56. That's not really my size. But I actually probably out of those three, that's my favorite size.
We had that same experience with the Black Label though, the Grand Toro.
Yeah, the big Grand Toro. That'd be the last stick that I would have tried in that lineup. And it's my favorite. I think
it was probably the biggest fear of that release, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember Pete talking about it. He's like, I don't know how this one. That when I'm doing events, that's one of the top three.
Yeah.
That are selling at events. So. Yeah.
Well, Toros are always
about
popular.
that. I let the dogs out.
Oh, no problem. No problem.
Yeah.
So I guess the bottom line for me is you don't know until you've tried it in different sizes. So like when I smoke another brand that everyone's raving about and I smoke one and I'm like, I like it, but I mean, it's not bowling me over. Right. I don't really know that about that branding or that blend until I've tried the other sizes, because something probably is, if I like something in a different size is probably going to blow me away, right? I'll love it. Not always, but most of the time. And it might not be the thing that I would expect. It might be a smaller ring gauge that I was like, yeah, it really, I like it so much better at that size. So I've been having that experience for 15 years now. So it's a big thing for me now to not just say, yeah, no, I tried one of those, or if I do, I have to tell you, well, I tried one, but I haven't tried the rest of them, and I liked it, but I didn't love it like everybody else is loving it, right?
Right.
So I tell everybody that, break away from your mold and especially if you like it, right? If it's just not your thing, it's, there might be a size that you like, but we always talk about your thing is that thing that you love, right?
Right.
There are a lot of cigars out there that we like, but you're looking for something that's so special that you want more of it, right?
I think that's the thing about the Havana Cellars that's interesting to me. I was thinking about this reflectively before tonight's interview, because I was looking at the cigars that I was going to smoke tonight, the special selection, and of course the Animal Cracker that I'm smoking now. And the thing that I love about Tatuaje specifically is I much like Pete, I do favor and I do like the more quote unquote connoisseur sizes, the smaller gauges, smaller cigars. And I think that they just kind of speak to my palate a little bit more. Whereas like for instance, Casey, we were talking about the Grand Kohanu, right? In comparison to like the Animal Cracker, for example, like what that education was like to your consumers as you were kind of talking about it. And it's interesting in the L'Atelier Surrogates, I gravitate more towards against my quote unquote wheelhouse, right? The
Right.
animal cracker I dig, the bigger gauges and the Latelier are definitely my favorites of some of the ones that you guys make. And so it's interesting that the same, again, we were talking about the merger and how seamless this was for you guys, but like even under the same umbrella now, I gravitate towards different cigar
Hmm.
vitolas in with throughout the portfolio. They just kind of speak to me that way.
Hmm.
Yeah, recently Pete rolled some Racine blend in the 52, 54, and 56 sizes.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and that was the telltale, right? That was the same experience. It's like,
Right.
oh, well, we've done that in the connoisseur size. You know, we've done that as a torpedo. We've done that as a short Churchill.
Hmm.
And now these three are like completely different. And we may bring those out next year. They were that good.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, it'll be a fun project to have. Because originally those were for what is the PCA now. It was the IPCPR stick when we originally brought it out. It was 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then we changed sizes every year.
So we were talking a little about this before in the green room as well, and I thought this was an interesting subject because, and this is my opinion, I think it's inevitable that Havana Cellars gets a #1 cigar of the year from Cigar Aficionado. And you were talking about the La Mission, at the very beginning of the show, and how it scored incredibly well this year, and how it's all but guaranteed to land on the top 25 at this point, I would say. And its hope is certainly that it could obviously earn the #1 spot, but gets a higher regard. But in 2013, well documented how incredibly well the Latelier performed. 95 that year, prior to the 94 ended up being a 95, but 94 leading into the final bracket as they do it. And it got robbed. There's no other way to say it. I'm going to say it. It got robbed, and it didn't crack the top 10. Unfortunately, it ended up at the #12 spot in 2013 and everything. But reflectively looking back, Casey, when that happened, I mean, considering that was 2013, you had just started this project with your brother a year prior and everything. I mean, did you see that as a disappointment? Were you really excited about how well it was received, or was it a mix mash of both? And it kind of just like, what were the feelings for you?
It was a mix. It was a mash of both, realistically, because you wanted to perform at the highest level, but we were still a young company. We're still growing, finding our footing in being actually alone at the time. So it was in a way, but you look at the ratings that we get now, including the surrogates. It says a lot about what we're putting out there into the consumer's hands. Excitement for the future. I think there's a lot more that can be done, and if it happens this year, awesome. But we'll keep plugging away at it. We're finding people that really like our stuff and hitting we hit their palate, and we produce it. I guess my brother says it the best. We produce cigars that we like, and along the way, people are finding they like them too, and that's just the plus. That's the gravy. That's the icing on the cake, I guess.
For sure. So Dan, we were talking about this a little bit earlier as well, and it's interesting because when you get the #1 cigar of the year, what we've kind of seen in past, and I had Alan Rubin on last week, so this was an interesting discussion because his struggle with the #1 ranking was documented. It was very real, and he actually put his story out. The after #1. story was
Yeah.
was written by a cigar aficionado, and it's for anyone who follows the industry, it's a glorious but heartbreaking tale, and what him and his company were able to do in kind of almost a phoenix like rise from the ashes kind of thing to get back to notoriety and acclaim has been fantastic to see from a fan's perspective, and just from again from a person looking at the industry's perspective. It, again, in my eyes, it's inevitable that Havana Cellars takes the #1 spot. It just I see it sooner than later. What you and what Pete has done over the years, I mean, it's well earned and well deserved. When that happens, I will be along many people overjoyed.
We'll come down and celebrate with you.
Sounds good. So my question to you is that it's the blessing and the curse. Like, so Dan, I want to get your thoughts on this. When that inevitable happens, and it's kind of hard to predict this because you don't know if it's this year, you don't know it's 10 years from now. I mean, how would you guys expect to approach that kind of accolade from where you sit?
Pete's a pretty humble guy, so I think that was
that wasn't a
that was a
I was gonna say ill-timed, KZ, ill-timed.
No,
oh my goodness.
I know. No, he is extremely humble, for sure.
So, I think all of us that would feel the same way, that that's the way you have to take that. I mean, when it doesn't happen, of course, you're saying this. I would hope that we say the same thing, which is it's a very subjective thing, right? And yes, it may change. It may change a lot of things. You better be ready for it from the growth side if that's where it takes you, right? So be smart and let it take you there, right? You're not going to fight that, but the rest of it is the humbleness of accepting it and saying, okay, but we also know that it's a very subjective thing. So good for us, and good for #2, and good for #3, and it's
and to
kind
be
of
honest with you,
being in the top 10, but
right. And realistically, from the logistics piece, I mean, we're blessed to be with somebody that's won 2.
Yeah,
and
they've dealt with it a couple times. So when you think about that, the production side, if it really turned into, oh my, everybody and their brother wants this all of a sudden, the factory has done exactly that twice already. So
yeah, and the amazing thing is that Florida Las Ventillas is still got a stronghold in the industry.
Yeah,
I mean, they've it's arguably the best #1 that's been out there when it comes to performance in the marketplace. It still holds the strength on the shelf for the retailer.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I think it's interesting what this would be if, say, for example, it did happen this year. Okay, and that would make the My Father cigar the 3rd time that they've hit the #1 spot. They've produced the #1 cigar of the year, and leaning on that kind of experience would have to be obviously inevitable as well. But it has to give you guys that degree of confidence that again, and this is my opinion, and I don't think I'm being crazy, and I don't think you guys are being any. You talked about Pete being humble, and I don't think it's. I don't. I don't want to put words in y'all's mouth, but I think you guys probably feel the same, that one day it'll come, because of the incredible work that you guys have put in. I mean, am I putting words in your mouth? I mean, do you feel that the work that you guys have put in would eventually lead to that kind of accolade? I don't want to put you on the spot, and I apologize.
I might be surprised that Pete already hasn't had one. If we're just talking like 3 guys sitting around smoking. You know, I would probably tell you I'm surprised that he hasn't had one already. But yeah. So
The reason I'm so bold in my declaration of it is because I thought last year it was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen last year, and ultimately didn't. And I remember talking about it with Pete, and he's like, "No, it's not going to happen this year." And you know, as Pete is so prone to do, he actually even named the. We were having a discussion via text, and he was like, "I think it's going to be this cigar, this cigar, this cigar, this cigar," and he named the top 5 basically almost in order. And I think it was perfectly to a T. It was
he pays attention to that stuff.
He really does.
Diligent. He really does, and he's had a long relationship with Cigar Aficionado when it comes to, you know, the people that he you know, he's known Marvin forever. He's known Gordon. He's known Greg and Savona, all those guys exceptionally well. And Pete was very candid early on in his career as a boutique and as a leader in the industry when it came to being in the boutique side, in the change, I guess it was the change of the industry, right? Wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
You know, back in the day.
Yeah.
So, you know, he pays attention to what they do. He pays attention to everybody, what's going on. He's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on. That's the beauty of working with Pete. You know, he's got his ears on the track, I guess.
I will say that I hope that when it does happen, that it happens with a production stick like this, and it's not an exception. And they're like, "Oh, that T110 is the #1 cigar of the year."
It's not like the Andalusian Bull or Eye of the Shark or something. Some limited
it's
production.
Not one of those things we released 1,000 boxes of and never intended on doing it again. Now that's supposedly not in their MO, but they did do that with the Eye. So they weren't #1, but they were #2,
right?
With a stick that was limited stick. And then Andre had to turn around and go, "I guess I'll make that again now." I mean, it was a one and done thing. It was one of those things early on, like I was talking about before Surrogates. It was one of those things that, like, I got 3 boxes of to sell, and it was like, and then it was #2 on the list.
Wow.
So that's not supposed to be part of their whole methodology, but it has happened. And that's my big joke is watch it happen 1 year down the road, and it's going to be this thing that we released as like the Monster, right?
Right.
What if they come around and say Karloff is the #1 cigar of the year? I mean, it's not even supposed to ever be rated, but like if they make the mistake of rating it and then it ends up there, then you're like, that's funny. We weren't going to make that again. What's that do for you?
Thanks, guys. Yeah. No, I think that over the years of paying attention to this list as well it's one of the most unsatisfying things is when a Cuban gets named #1, just because it's like, okay, that's great.
Yeah,
none of us can get
not
it.
Really supposed to have it either. Yeah.
Which was my whole contention. I actually called the #1 when Ernesto won it with the Encore. I picked that year. And one of my base arguments wasn't just about the cigar's performance, which I thought it was very well. It was my #1 cigar of the year the same year. Thanks for overshadowing me there, Cigar Aficionado. Appreciate that. But my contention was that I didn't see Cigar Aficionado doing that 3 years in a row, naming a cigar #1 that wasn't readily available to most of its market. They did it, the Andalusian Bull, then the Eye of the Shark, which they're domestic cigars, but they were never intended to be widely mass released productions.
Right.
And for them to do a 3rd year and then come back with a Cuban for the 3rd year, I just thought, no, it just can't happen. And then last year, even though I thought, and if I may backpedal a little bit here, I did say that I did think that Pete was going to get the #1, but I also said that I thought that a Cuban had a chance for it, and that was because it's due technically, right?
Yeah.
just the way that they've done things historically. So it's an interesting discussion, and I think it's poignant considering my company tonight, because I think you guys are sitting on, the inevitability of, and not many people get to say that, which is just speaks to the incredible work that Pete has done, and then subsequently what the two of you guys have as well. So long.
You asked about 2013. If we go back to that, one of our reactions was, well, we're going to throw out the Cubans that are in the top 10, and then we're in the top 10, because I think there were 3 of them that year that ended up on top of Atelier. And so we just threw those out and said, we're actually in the top 10.
There you go.
That was an unbelievably strong year for 94 rated at the end of the first. Yeah. At the first round. That was
there were a
high
ton
number of 94s. Yeah.
In the end, there were a ton of 95s.
Yeah. Yep.
Which the lat ended up at 95. I don't know. I don't remember what number on was all 95.
He was like 4 or 5 in a row that were 95. It was crazy. It was a really strong year.
It worked its way right down. 95 ended up with Willie at number 8, I think. Willie Herrera
might have been.
Yeah. So there's some strength. It was a solid year for ratings for cigars.
Maybe it will be this year, since everything this year has an asterisk after it because it's the COVID year.
It's like, oh, that would be tragic. Oh goodness, don't say it, Dan. Don't say it.
Who's going to win the college national championship? Well, who cares, man? Some of these teams have only played 5 games. Like, you want that? I know you want the trophy, but everybody's going to always say, yeah, with an asterisk, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is, Casey and I are Red Sox fans, so we'd like to erase this asterisk of a year off of our memories for sure.
We brought him back, though. We'll see what happens. Well, hey, listen. Poor Coop has to deal with I think he likes the fact that Dombrowski's coming on to.
He does.
Oh my God. He just and you know what? Like three lines down, Danny Tiant goes, no, because he saw what happened to the Red Sox. Danny goes, I hate that guy. And he destroys the farm system. So.
And Coop's argument was, well, their farm system already sucks. So what's he's like, go ahead and sell it off. Something better will happen.
Yeah.
I wasn't, as you and I had this discussion. I wasn't that hard on Dombrowski. I mean, I thought he was, I'm still like in this fairy tale land where I'm like, Terry Francona is still our manager and Theo's still our GM. And, we're still living.
Yep.
That's what it should be. And in reality, it's just not. I didn't think Ben Sherrington needed to leave because he was
I don't think so either.
I didn't hate Farrell as much as some of the other guys, but I still, Tito should still be the manager for the Red Sox. It's just
Tito should be the manager, and there were some transgressions that took place, and Veritek was part of it, and there's a lot of inner workings there that were a nightmare. But yeah, I mean, that's our Red Sox, right? Terry,
absolutely.
and then Farrell was the pitching coach back then, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It was magical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, I got 2 more questions and then our curveball segment to conclude our night. But I want to take this time to I always take this time towards the end of the night to thank my guests. Sunday night is, even in the COVID era that we've been living in the last 9 months, Sunday night is still family night, and it's still your time to spend with family. And I cannot thank you 2 gentlemen enough for spending the last 3 hours with me to talking about the journey of what you guys have brought to this industry, and the unique evolution that has taken place within y'all's brands, and how it's built in such a very short time. We talk about 10 years with Dan next year, 9 years with you next year, Casey. I mean, that's some really, really amazing stuff has happened in just a decade. And it's incredible to look back on. And so I really thank you all for your time tonight. So thank you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
So kind of pivoting towards some of the more, I guess, interesting things that happened this year within the COVID era, which was of course, the cancellation of the PCA trade show. Now, Pete, along with you guys at Havana Cellars, has is a long touted incredible support for the PCA. Uh, been huge advocates for it. Been huge advocates for the industry. I remember a discussion that I had with Pete right after the initial press conference at the last IPCPR trade show that we had, and we were talking about the the highly touted and controversial Cigar Con. And Pete was saying how I asked him point blank about it, and he said, Bear, I support the industry, and I will always support the industry, and whatever the industry needs of me, I will give, and I will do whatever I can for the industry. And I know you guys follow suit with that, but I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on, with the cancellation of the PCA trade show and with this incredible, and we'll say the word that's been said way too many times in the last 9 months, the unprecedented time that we are living in. Do you all think that there will be a 2021 PCA trade show?
I'm hoping. It's a hard one. We're still battling this virus. We're still battling retailers getting back to some sense of normalcy. Most of you guys have worked your butts off to keep it normal by doing curbside or whatever, and staying alive, keeping your heads above water. So for the sake of the industry, I hope it does happen.
I'll play devil's advocate on it on one point, and that would be, let's say summer is the time when things start getting back to normal, right? And that would be the time for the show. Okay, but you just lived through 18 months of, despair, just trying to keep your business going. Are you really going to walk away right as things are stepping up? Are you going to walk away for 3 to 5 days to go to the show?
No, I hear you.
So it's kind of devil's advocate, more about attendance more than it is from our side.
Back to the age-old argument, attendance, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
For an entirely different reason, though.
Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
I mean, 'cause I can imagine as a shop owner, it's already a decision to say, okay, I'm going to step away. I've got somebody that can take charge. That's great.
Right.
Step away because I've always gone. I love going, that kind of stuff, right? But now you're making a decision based on the fact that this is maybe the first or second month that we're really, really getting back to normal, and maybe, like going crazy because people are like, I can actually go hang out at the cigar shop like we used to for real.
Yeah.
Like, without trying to sneak in the back door and all the stuff that's going on now. The business could be booming in the summer. And I don't know if I would step away from my shop to go.
Yeah.
That's the biggest caveat that I can think of. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, here's another interesting twist, right? So TPE postpones TPE to May, which basically puts it 6 weeks, 45 days prior to when PCA is scheduled. So,
right.
In the last 24 months, there's been this discussion point about TPE versus PCA, et cetera, and now they're basically going to be banging on each other's doorsteps. So, what from the Havana Cellars perspective, what are you guys going to be doing? Is this something would you attend both shows? Would you just attend PCA? What's your strategy along that?
I think I'm allowed to say this, but we're not going to TPE.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're supporting the industry as a whole, and PCA seems to be the way to go because of their support of the retailer
and legislation. I mean,
legislation, absolutely.
That's probably. I mean, that's kind of the big point, I think, especially from
absolutely
Pete's standpoint, the Garcias, others in the industry that feel the way they do is, you know, the PCA is an organization that's at least, you know, contributing towards, you know, that cause. And that's important because they're all putting their own money up for the same reason. So they want to support an organization that's also doing that.
Do you think Havana Cellars will have, from a footprint perspective, will they have a similar footprint that we're used to seeing each year at the PCA? Will you guys take a smaller strategy or a larger one, or is that even subject been brokered yet?
That's a good question.
We talked about it.
Larger.
Right, it won't be larger, right? But I think it's still a wait and see thing for us.
Yeah.
With that, you know, we're you know, there's a lot can happen within the next, you know, 5 months. A lot of change, so you know, it's constant motion. So
I mean, look, it's a big commitment to go to the show. It's a lot of money, time, you know, all that, and you know, the benefits outweigh that. We get to see everybody, you know, all in one place. We look forward to it as much as they do, but you know, it's a matter of whether it's even going to happen, and then you know, obviously if it does, I would assume that we'll be there, even if attendance is lower.
So Dan, you mentioned legislation, and legislatively, the premium cigar industry had two really distinct and powerful victories in 2020. That's the one good thing that we can say that came out of this year, and that was, of course, the warning labels decision, but also the subsequent decision recently handed down by a judge, Amit Mehta, who proclaimed that the FDA's, I love saying this every fucking week, it's great, the FDA's position had no merit. That their regulation of the way that they wanted to regulate the premium cigar industry did not hold water, essentially, and that and the FDA all but even admitted that they didn't have the resources to regulate the premium cigar industry in the way that they had fastened when they handed down this the deeming regulations years ago. So this was a huge win for us. Now, nothing's going away. It's still there, but it's basically just, for all intents and purposes, has just been cast aside and put into this kind of state of flux. But it has opened the door. It has opened the door for at least a window is the metaphor that I've been choosing to use for a lot of brands who are established like y'all's selves and brands who want to become established to release cigars to the market. Is that part of the Surrogates L'Atelier strategy to now take advantage of this window of opportunity and put some things to market that maybe you all were conservatively holding back because, you know, it just wasn't achievable?
Somewhat. And then, you know, from the Havana Cellars standpoint, there's a lot of stuff, right? When we registered names and, you know, sizes that we've produced, there's a hell of a lot more than, you know, what we're currently marketing, i.e. there's a lot of stuff from Pete's history that can come back,
right,
and or can come back in, you know, a different form and still be that thing that would, you know, that's already quote unquote on the books. Right. So it's kind of twofold. We don't talk about it in necessarily the way that you just brought it up, which is, hey, you know, open window,
carte blanche,
so just create stuff. We're still thinking of it in terms of, you know, I mean, you did that size, you know, we already did that. We'll do something, but it's already based on something that existed.
Yeah, and that tends to play into right. Pete's longevity in the industry is giving us that, right?
Yeah.
To be able to do that. So that's a big plus. Yeah, I think we're staying to the script a little bit. We're not deviating too much. You know, we'll reintroduce some stuff, but I don't think we're going to go too far outside the box. You know, where you were saying, you know, open the door or open the window. Where we'll stick close to the script.
Yeah, I think, you know, you're going to see some limited releases that, you know, had been done in the past, done again as a, you know, the same kind of limited release, but, you know, getting it out to more retailers than just the one that it was originally created for. You're gonna see that. You're probably gonna see some of that next year, actually. But yeah, like what in that realm of, hey, if there is a PCA show, what are we going to introduce at the show? We're not having that conversation right now, other than some of the stuff that we've kind of already talked about,
right?
Which would come out whether there's a show or not. But yeah.
So, John, this is our final question of the night, which is always our curveball segment, and I'm throwing in an extra one just because of something that I learned about Dan and his background. And you were talking about the acting lessons that you took in LA when you were first starting out. So you're an actor. So I'm going to put a pin in that for a second, and we're going to talk about specifically Surrogate cigars and L'Atelier cigars. Now, we've kind of had this discussion all night about how it's all kind of been under one, you know, umbrella for a long time, and the merger was kind of the seamless transition that was just kind of natural and everything. But, you know, as you know, even though there are very distinct identities that we talked about, so I wanted to pose this question to both of you, but in opposite. So the question to KC is, which Surrogates blend would you wish could be actually a L'Atelier branded product? And Dan, which L'Atelier blend would you wish could be a Surrogates product? So you guys are both thinking about this very hard, really quick. So I'll give you a second, and then I'm going to give Dan the honors.
I would take Côte d'Or that we did as a limited run and put that in a different size under the Surrogates umbrella.
And I'm going to say 7th Sam.
There you go.
Yeah.
I would say that too. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it would work.
Côte d'Or would be awesome because we could come up with some goofy names.
I was going to ask you, what do you think the name would be? I'm putting you on the spot. Come up with something.
It would not be coat of arms, but you know, play on that like that.
No, do a petite and call it El Pibe. Maradona.
It's interesting you said the 7th Sam, Casey, because that's exactly what I was thinking. I was really thinking. I was like, I wonder if he's going to say the 7th Sam. So what made you choose that?
Well, I mean, I haven't smoked it yet, but the 7th Sam and the Robusto, and I have to hear Dan say it over and over again. I'm a little jealous.
I've only smoked 2.
Well, guess what? Mom and Dad got that coming into the shop.
I take that back. I smoked all 5 samples.
I was going to say.
Without sending you any. Yeah, I smoked 5.
It's all good. It gives me a reason to go buy a sample.
Oh no, I've smoked 5. That
5. I
haven't smoked a sampler yet.
Right. I'd be interested to see that in another size, in the Atelier end.
Yeah. I
have no idea what we'd call it.
All right, Dan. So last curveball to you.
754.
Oh.
Ooh. Do it in the 54 size.
There you go.
We're not even drinking. See, we can give up alcohol.
No more bourbon, right? Oh,
yeah.
Damn. Okay.
So,
next curveball.
So Dan, pivoting to you. Okay, so you're the actor. Okay. And for everyone out there, we were talking about your. I asked you if you did Shakespeare at one point. You said that you did a really interesting rendition of Richard III, which was done with David Bowie music. So love to see that. So, so I have to ask this question. So, if you were, I know you're the actor, but if you were putting the director hat on or the casting director on, so who in Hollywood today would play your partners in Havana Cellars? So who would play Pete Johnson and who would play KC Johnson?
Ah, shit.
I don't know now.
Go Clooney for Pete.
Yeah,
Doppelganger.
but you'd have to go back to when he was younger.
I was thinking about Clooney for Pete. So that's funny. That's 2 for 2. You and I are on the same
Yeah.
wavelength there, Casey. That's pretty crazy.
Absolutely.
I think Clooney looks good in a stash, man. He could pull that off.
Yeah,
Oh,
he
yeah.
could.
Yeah.
He could.
And especially if you go back in time a little bit so that they match age.
Yeah. Totally.
Then 100% that.
What about for Casey?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah,
Casey?
it's a tough one.
See,
I'm unique.
I went 2 directions with Casey when I was thinking about this question for you, Dan. So I
John
literally
Malkovich would play me.
I could see
Yeah.
that. I could see that. Okay. Nice, man. Nice pick. That I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking about Casey and Pete because I was asking you this question. See, I thought about 2 people for Casey, and I think one's too old, and I think one's too edgy. So the edgy pick was Vin Diesel.
Yeah.
And I just think I think he's a little too gruff. I think Casey's very approachable. I'd still be a little like scared to talk to Vin Diesel. There's something about it.
Nah, actually, he's pretty cool dude. My brother-in-law worked with him in a call center in LA selling tools. Yeah.
Okay.
Pretty approachable guy.
Interesting. So the too old guy that I thought of was Bruce Willis. But he's too old. Yeah.
Bruce Willis could be it.
But the John Malkovich pick for Dan, I think that wins it. I think that wins it. Yeah, that totally wins it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That said, we were in Bordeaux. Pete and myself and the girls were with us, and we were walking around Saint Emilion, and we had lunch. We had no idea what this person was talking about, and people in the street kept saying it over and over again, and it sounded like Brew Willie.
Yeah, Bruce Willis.
So Bruce Willis had just done some movie where he had gained a bunch of weight, and he had this huge beard, and I'm over there weighing more than I do right now even, and I had this freaking big beard going on, and it wasn't white, and shaved head, and that they were, as I was passing, that's what they were like, is that Bruce Willis? And it was, we were finally sitting for lunch, and
You're like a foot taller than him.
Someone said it. Yeah. I know, he's tiny. I have a picture of him in the wax museum in Los Angeles, and I'm standing right next to him, and I'm like, these are life size, aren't they? I'm like, hey, Bruce.
Well, the other person for Dan would be, oh goodness gracious, back in the day, early Dan, Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah, you got to see old pictures.
You got to see some of the old pictures of Dan when he was lifting weights, and he had a huge
mane of hair,
curly
hair.
Yep.
I still have that video somewhere of you doing push-ups at the event here in Texas, Dan, with Don Jennings on your back, which was just most impressive thing I've ever seen.
Or creepy.
Trying the hardest just to press one out. Yeah.
Don's not a big guy, but that was still a feat, I gotta say. But gentlemen, I cannot thank you enough for tonight. It has been incredible sitting down and talking with you all about this journey, and just incredible. Dan, I can't wait to have you back. Casey as well. I know there are always going to be great things to talk about with you two gentlemen, and really excited for this take, and it definitely delivers. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting us.
This was great.
So for everyone out there, we really do appreciate your time. Thank you for all your comments and likes and shares. If you are a fan of this show, be sure to check us out on Facebook at the ELOSOFUMAR page. You can check out our upcoming guest lists that will be released here in a couple of weeks going into the new year. We do have our 150th take coming up next week. Our 150th take, and Nick Perdomo will actually be sitting down with me next week. So I'm really excited for that. And if you are a fan of the show, check us out on Facebook, but you can also check us out on YouTube as well. The ELOSOFUMAR channel can like, subscribe, and review. And or if you're just listening to us wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure you download, subscribe, and review there. If you already are a subscriber, please, I encourage you, please unsubscribe. But dear God, don't forget to resubscribe, because that really helps my numbers and helps me keep getting great guests like the two gentlemen this evening. We thank you for everyone out there. Again, this was our 149th take. Done 149 of these. This is crazy. So as always, gentlemen, live from the HF Barcelona studios of Euless, Texas, I'm your host, Barry Duplessis, as always. And guess what, everyone? We'll see you next time.
Thanks again, man.